Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to episode 47. Got it right this time of the Stevie Richards Show. James is actually nodding off camera. Good boy. Good boys. Get the episode right. Get it right. He's pretty ruthless. And speaking of ruthless, today is our Ruthless Aggression episode leading up to the most avoided episode in Stevie Richards Show history, at least for me, and that is Mystery Woman versus Tomko at Unforgiven 2004. But let's talk about Ruthless Aggression, and let's turn it over to my ruthless co-host, James Romero.
Yeah, you heard my story about Scott McGee beforehand as well, so you're probably right there. Okay, I've got something funny that I'm not even going to say for Unforgiven 2004 episode, which should be next week as we're recording this. I saw what Dave Meltzer gave as a rating to that match with Tomko, and
he bothered to even give it a rating.
He gave it a rating. What do you think it was?
-5 stars.
-3, which means that it was still better than Andre versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3.
Really? We are better than the WrestleMania 3 main event, which drew the biggest house and put WWF at the time on another level.
Yes.
Wow. I'm going to give you an Easter egg back. I can't wait to tell you this because I'll probably forget next week. I looked up Unforgiven 2004, Tomko versus Mystery Woman, came up with a bunch of stuff, not the actual match, because I was curious to see if sometimes they upload the full match. They didn't bother to waste YouTube server space on the match. But the first thing that came up was Brian Zane's Wrestling with Regret, with the thumbnail of me doing this with the wig and dress. And I said, if there was ever a thumbnail that fully encapsulated the 3 words, Wrestling with Regret, Brian, you picked, that is the thumbnail right there.
I'm going to steal that thumbnail for next week as well, or I'll try and find at least the exact thing. You were doing that for weeks beforehand, but we're not talking about Mystery Woman this week. That is your tease.
Months. Yes.
Well, that is the tease for next week. The most embarrassing moment in Stevie's professional career that he's buried deep within his soul for 20 years, but he's finally going to relive for us next week. But we're going to do the intro first, then we've got a couple of corrections from last week. So very quickly, YouTube channels. I've got, obviously, Storytime with Dutch Mantel, the James Romero YouTube channel, which I upload maybe once a week, with my opinion on whatever's going on in the wrestling world. We have T-shirts out, including now the BWO, Blue World Order T-shirt. I've got mine on order, so hopefully by next week I'll be wearing it on the show as well to prove to all that they're all available after a lot of issues trying to get that damn design up, but I worked it out anyway with the people. There's also the Stevie Richards cameo as well, where if nothing else, nothing but 5-star reviews, nothing but a great review every single day or every other single day. The cameo has been blowing up for Stevie ever since we started plugging it here, and it continues to do so. Stevie puts in far more effort than 99% of other people that you go through on Cameo. I think I can say that with confidence, with hand on heart. That's absolutely true. So many people on the reviews have said that and confirmed that as well. And the last plug, before we get to the corrections, in fact, is the Patreon. We've got to be at nearly 1,000 subscribers now. It's clambering up by dozens every single week. And we watch one of your favourite matches of all time that will be out this Monday.
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorites, and actually got pretty emotional a few times, not only because of the subject matter, the person, Sabu, but also rewatching that, which I try not to rewatch anything from the past. James, is facilitating that. And it's going to be a stark contrast between the watch along here, and I'm assuming we're going to do the watch along of the Unforgiven 2004 match. So we got the good news first and the bad news last. But with that being said, I got emotional because how much Sabu had given his body, had patience, guided me, literally handheld me through that match at House Party 96. And looking back on it to see that it really was the match that set me up to be an actual wrestler in ECW and not just Raven's lackey. So it represented a lot of great memories and a lot of great career fulfillment that was about to begin after that match.
So that is once again the Stevie Richards Show Patreon. We do like a little mini podcast within the podcast every single week for the show. We do a full match watch along every single week. and other things like show notes and everything else as well. And so many people are enjoying it, being part of the community, and Stevie himself will write back to you as well if you message him, which you are able to do on the Patreon. Right, so before we get into the Ruthless Aggression run-up to Unforgiven 2004, we've got a couple of corrections to make. One was referee. You said Pee Wee Anderson, you meant Pee Wee, I nearly said Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Moore.
Pee Wee Herman refereeing would have been amazing. No, it was Pee Wee Moore. So Pee Wee Anderson, curly hair, mustache, really nice guy, really good ref in WCW. Pee Wee Moore was a tall guy, had the same kind of curly hair, but shaved around the sides and the back, and he was the person that would travel with Sabu. And Sabu, of course, many people have said, Sabu refused to let anybody pay for anything. He would pay for a lot of people and support a lot of people's travel expenses and meals and stuff like that. So we can't be remiss in trying to remind everybody almost every single week, every chance we get, to remember Sabu for all the good things that he did, both in the ring and, of course, outside the ring.
One more thing that you mentioned to me, you said this needed to be added, and I don't know why. Joey Legend. You mentioned something about Joey Legend?
Yeah, we had talked about the Joey Legend story about Just Joe when he was in WWF at the time.
Did we?
And
when?
We did talk. We talked about it quickly where it was said, the rumor was that Joe had said to Pat Patterson directly, I'm here to take your job. Do you remember talking about that?
No.
God, you have CT.
Yeah, I must
We talked about it. We talked about it. So Joe watches the show, listens to the show, and he says it's great work. He loves our chemistry and what we bring to the table here on YouTube. But he wanted to correct that and set the record straight that it was actually quite the opposite. He was sitting on a plane across from Pat Patterson, one aisle to the next, and leaned over, asked for advice, and also was very, very humbled, by the fact that Pat was giving him any kind of time. And there was some stuff here creatively with the Just Joe gimmick that was already kind of set up to fail. And there was more stuff that happened outside of Joe himself that caused that gimmick, because it had a lot to do, I think, with Hunter and other things, and it kind of fell through. And of course, being lumped in with his friends like, Edge and Christian and that Canada group that was real tight, and Pat really had an affinity for those talents. I think you could put Test in that category as well. That's why I think it was always a mystery why Joe, who super athletic guy, done some really innovative stuff for the mid to late 90s. I think that's why WWF hired him at the time, but it just didn't pan out with that. He was kind of like the film negative version of the Right to Censor look. He had all black on there, and he kind of was, if you think about it, in real life, it should have translated, because we talked about agents. The clip just came out about the best and worst agents, and talked about stooges. Just Joe is essentially going to be the most hated guy in the company and the locker room, because his gimmick was being a stooge and stirring the pot. So yeah, he just wanted to set the record straight that he didn't disrespect Pat Patterson, go up to him, and it didn't sound like him. Remember, you don't remember, but I said, it doesn't sound like him. It was quite the opposite, where he was looking for guidance and advice and coaching from somebody like Pat.
I feel really bad now. This is probably last week. Well, I say, I do so many of these shows that at some point it's hard to retain information of what I've done. So other people will correct me on, someone corrected me, I think, on something Sabu said when I interviewed him, and I have no recollection of asking at all. It's like,
well, that it happened. We make mistakes every week. The thing that we want to set ourselves apart, and we try to each and every episode, is if there is going to be retractions, corrections, all that stuff, we get stuff wrong, or I can misremember certain things. It's way, way back. You do a lot of this, but hey, Joe's a personal friend too, so that's why I want to go out of my way in this to set the record straight. And you weren't accusatory in saying this is exactly what happened. You just said essentially something like the rumor was, or the word was, or it was covered here. It wasn't you saying for 100% of fact, Just Joe was telling Pat Patterson, I'm here to take your job. That did not happen. And you didn't put it that exact way that you for a fact that happened.
If you speak to Joe again, right? So I remember in 2000, I didn't have Sky. So I didn't have Sky Sports, or Sky One or anything, which is where SmackDown and Raw was on, and all the pay-per-views at the time. But we did have terrestrial like everybody else. And on Channel 4 at the beginning of 2000 bought the rights to Heat. For whatever reason, they bought the rights to heat in 4 of the pay-per-views every year. Just Joe was on that constantly. He was all over Heat every single week, so I actually remember him really, really well. And the other thing I remember is briefly they tried to make Dean Malenko a James Bond character. Why, I don't know, but they seem to do that. But if you do talk to Joe again, ask him about celebrity wrestling. That's all I'll mention. Ask him about celebrity wrestling. Okay. So I can fill you on a more of the story of that. Right.
So he was the original GM of Stevie Night Heat.
Yeah, but also then you stole his all black look for when you were with Chronic those 2 weeks.
No, that was The Office that told me to switch from the right to censor to, because Chronic wore all black. And that's why I had the club shirt and the pants. I already had the black pants, so it was like money savings right there, right off the bat, repurposed.
Excellent.
Still had the white socks, by the way.
You need to bring up the money-saving chart once again on the big screen, like you did in like the first couple of weeks when we were doing this. Actually, I kind of missed the big screen.
Well, we'll start doing smartboard segments again. Actually, we might have a solo episode coming up very soon where I will explain and have a full smartboard episode for everybody out there. It should be good for about 2,000 views.
Don't you ever say that, Bob. Don't you ever say that. Right. Let's do it. Let's get into Ruthless Aggression. Now, specifically, why we've chosen this is because when we did ECW WWE, or WWE's version of ECW, for 2006 and December to Dismember, we did like a pre-pay-per-view show where we did all the build-up to the big event. Quote, big event, not the complete disaster. And we've sort of done the same thing here with Unforgiven. So I've looked up some news and come up with some talking points in the month or so in the lead up to Unforgiven 2004, which was September of 2004. So we're in the follow-up shows from SummerSlam 2004. Randy Orton is now the world champion after defeating Chris Benoit. WWE SummerSlam 2004, that was the main event. He captured the championship, as I said here. I think he was like the youngest world champion, or maybe the second youngest world champion. I can't remember how they billed him. But memorably, both Benoit and Eddie Guerrero celebrated in the ring together at WrestleMania 20. Or it could have been, as the joke goes, it was Eddie Guerrero and Stevie Richards celebrating in the ring at WrestleMania 20 post-2007, because Stevie replaces everybody. Why do you replace
the original great replacement theory.
You are.
To people. I replaced Big Show. I replaced, the person that for a long time should not be named, as he was called. And, and people, the internet is undefeated, and lots of Photoshop licenses went to work on replacing Chris Benoit.
So, the reason I'm bringing this up, right, is because Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, they were both their respective world champions at the end of WrestleMania 20. And they were, I don't know how much was their fault or how much wasn't their fault, or love to know your opinion. They were basically, as them two on top, they were the worst drawing champions since Diesel. Obviously, the business as a whole was on a massive downslide ever since the invasion of the WCW invasion of 2001. But can you talk specifically about Chris Benoit's title run? You were on WWE Raw at the time. How much should a world champion be blamed or praised as in this time period for how well the viewership is doing and how well the houses are selling out?
I think I know you bring up an excellent point, because you need to bring up the entire kind of wide field of view about the time. They're looking at it like, from WrestleMania 20 to when Benoit lost the title to Orton at SummerSlam, wow, that was the worst. We're never doing this again. Of course, there's been many people who have been quoted about vanilla midgets and these guys sub 6 foot being world champions and criticizing that in retrospect. But when you look at it, it's almost like WWE was ahead of where they were going anyway. Look at today. Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, CM Punk was the longest reigning WWE champion in history up until a certain point when Roman Reigns beat that, correct? Mm-hmm. So in the business, I dare I say, it was hotter with smaller, thinner guys, much smaller than Benoit and Guerrero, who were still looked like tough dudes, even though they weren't over 6 foot. But what you said was excellent. I feel like, much like a lot of things need time to develop, say 6 months to a year to turn the business in a positive direction. In this case, WCW going out of business, that invasion angle, no competition, and the quality of the entire product, they were phoning it in. It looked like, at least, and felt like they were phoning it in because there was nobody to compete against. And TNA, even in 2003, started the weekly pay-per-views, 2002, 2003. That wasn't going to be competition to make WWE want to raise their level with that. So maybe they just said, let's go a different direction and have these two guys as champions and see how we draw, much like they did with Brett and Shawn. That experiment worked with that. And dare I say, like I said before, Benoit and Guerrero are bigger dudes than Shawn and Brett. They're at least, more muscular and thicker guys. So I think this is where the business from 2001 with the sale of WCW, no competition, and the level of creativity going down over those 3 years, that's what caused this to finally get noticed. And of course, they're going to blame the two guys that they shifted from the monsters to blame them. I don't believe the world champion does. The world champion, if they're interesting, like in Austin, creating sellouts and everything and really shedding the early to mid 90s where they were really hurting for money and then defeating WCW, that can be said. But just as much, they're probably blaming the world champions for the downturn that was 3 years in the making. That's the way I looked at it being part of the company. We knew the second that Vince did that simulcast and WCW was no longer a place for the boys to go or the girls to go, and no longer a place to keep WWE honest and raise the level of creativity. That's my point. I mean, I know it's a long tangent, but you can't just say yes or no. There's reasons leading up to this.
We'll talk about Benoit specifically as world champion in a minute. Do you think that there was a lot of pressure from the internet wrestling community, which is obviously getting more of a voice with the expansion of the internet, I guess, at this point, to have this happen? Because I almost think, having them both champion at the same time and then them both losing their respective titles within 5 months, maybe? I know they didn't do very, very long title runs at that point, but still, neither of them ever won a world title ever again. Was this maybe Vince's way or somebody else saying, see? We've given them as little opportunity as possible to get over as world champion, and now they failed.
There is something that I've always sensed with Vince or even wrestling promoters and bookers in general. Be careful what you wish for. Now we're going to give it to you and prove how you're wrong. Because this was WrestleMania 20, the year of WrestleMania 20, correct? In
2004. Yeah.
2 years later in Chicago, WrestleMania 22, they wanted to prove the fans wrong again by putting the belt on Rey Mysterio and have it being such a watered-down, milquetoast championship run. And he won it in a three-way, which is like the story gets muddled too with that. It's almost like you win by process of or attrition in a way. All the other two guys are taking each other out and you're just going to slip in and win. And Ray deserved better. And I'm surprised even after whatever failed experiment they set up to fail in the beginning anyway with Benoit and Guerrero, that they revisited it two years later with an even smaller guy, which, dare I say it, even more popular, bigger merch seller. I mean, the Ray was selling masks, T-shirts, and everything else. And that might have been what put him in that spot to be world champion, to see if they can sell even more merch. Just my guess.
So, because you were on Raw this entire time, we're going to stick with Benoit. How did you feel overall Benoit did as world champion? I know that's a very broad question, but overall, how do you think he represented the Raw brand? Did you take him seriously, or do you think the fans took him seriously as world champion? Or was there more of a feeling that he was transitioning until Triple H, inevitably got it back, I suppose?
I took him seriously as a champion because of his work. People took him seriously because he looked like a threat. He not only to defend the title, but literally he was called the Crippler. And he made people tap out. He had a viciousness and an edge to him. But I don't feel like anybody thought he was a transitional champion. Maybe politically backstage, the Triple H people and everybody that wanted to get that title were pulling out the knives or not saying yes, but, definitely saying no. By not saying yes, it's saying no. With that, I don't think anybody sandbagged Chris. I don't think anybody sabotaged the matches. His matches were still high quality during his title defenses. What hurt Chris in my mind, and it didn't hurt Eddie. I don't even know why they took the belt off Eddie, because this is where Chris really fell short. How did you feel about Chris Benoit? I know people how they feel about him now. When he was alive and when he was champion, outside of saying that dude's stuff looked real, it looks real. That dude's intense. That dude hurts people. That dude makes people tap out. He's a machine. He's a wrestling machine. Okay, well, why should I care about you? What are you saying? How are you telling a truth about Triple H or your challenger? How are you bringing a personal issue? How is somebody attacking you personally? With Eddie, the substance abuse, coming back from that, being rehired and winning the title against Brock was all a Rocky story, if you think about it.
But he's also the most charismatic person in the company as well.
But I'm getting to that.
Sorry.
That's where the Eddie part is the bigger mystery, because he comes out with the lowrider, the bounces, the music is there. He's got the, it's fun. I get goosebumps thinking about Eddie's entrance, because it's such a high energy, fun entrance that people can get into. Oh, what car? Even something like, hey, what car is he going to come out to today with the entrance? That's something to watch. And then he gets in the ring, and not even just his work rate is right there with Benoit's, but he does stuff like hits the chair on the mat, falls back, lie, cheat, and steal. That's why, like, Benoit's one thing I can understand it kind of getting, the leash for whatever with Chris was short, because he only had so much to offer, and the promos weren't great. And also, Chris didn't look like he was fun to watch. Eddie was a lot of fun to watch from the beginning to the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of the reason that Eddie Guerrero's world title run was shorter than it could have been, I mean, obviously there's creative reasons as well, but the stories at the time were that Eddie felt the pressure as world champion tremendously. Like, it changed him. And it really became like a job where it wasn't even remotely fun for him anymore. Because obviously, as you said and I said, in 2004, ticket sales were down. And, the shows, by and large, were pretty uninspiring. Especially because so many of, the big stars that the brand split had been built upon in 2002 had long gone as well. Even your Goldbergs and Brock Lesnar's had been gone by, 2004. The WrestleMania 20, in fact. But with Benoit, and specifically world champions in general, I know you've never been a world champion in WWE, of course, but how much pressure do you see first-time champions under, as far as, wanting to prove themselves, have the best match every night, leave the arena the last people to leave the arena, added obligations as well?
Yeah, there's a lot to think about. I think if you're talking about an analogy, I'm a big NFL fan. You could take that journey to the Super Bowl. You win the Super Bowl. Now it feels completely different as the defending world champion of the of the NFL or whatever. There's all this pressure. There's no pressure when you're going for it, because you're like, okay, I'm going for it. Then when you get there, and this is another analogy I just thought about. It's a lot like getting into wrestling and wanting to go to WWE or be on TV. You have an idea what it's going to be like. You have a dream. Oh man, when I get there, I finally made it, and then I can relax, and then I can really enjoy my time because I reached the top of the mountain. But then you realize it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be, no matter what level you're on. Maybe Eddie won the title and then felt the immense pressure, and maybe he was paying attention to the gate, paying attention to the pay-per-view buys, paying attention to things where the business became a business and not fun anymore for him to let loose. Now, did it translate in the ring? Not that I noticed. There wasn't like a pressure, or I didn't feel him trying to force anything. He was still the utmost professional and performer when he went out there. And I feel bad hearing that. If that's true, Eddie deserved to enjoy the title run after everything he's been through. And this is something, can you imagine if Eddie Guerrero Prime in 2004 existed today in the current TKO Endeavor WWE? He would be beyond the most over act. I can see him coming out in the stadium WrestleMania with an army of lowriders coming down and just having, and I'm sad my friend's not here to experience any of that newfound, how should I say, boom period, like mainstream recognition of WWE.
We can come back to Benoit in a minute. I also want to make mention that John Bradshaw Layfield, he was similarly having issues as WWE champion as far as being a draw. I also want to bring this up with SummerSlam 2004 because both he and The Undertaker were booed. This was in Toronto, by the way, which of course they're going to boo everybody. But The Undertaker was visibly angry in the ring at this point. And the thing is, I think at the time, no one took Bradshaw seriously as world champion. But over time, as you look back on it, it really was a pretty good run for him as well. And I think it was just because it was in just almost the dark ages of 2004 that it doesn't get appreciated enough. And also, the SmackDown roster was terrible in 2004.
Well, also, if you look at it, and John doesn't deserve any blame either, because once again, you had probably such, I give him credit because he went from APA Bradshaw to John Bradshaw Layfield almost overnight.
Yeah, well, the reason was because everyone was injured. I think everyone was injured, and Vince just went, you. And he got his opportunity, made the most of it as well. But it's tough for the fans to go from tag team mid-card guy to the man in SmackDown.
Well,
and Eddie has all the credit in the world for helping that happen.
He deserves 100% of the credit because it was up to him to go out every night, cut the promo, and he changed his look completely from long black hair, beard or mustache, goatee to light, but his natural hair color, I assume, which is like mine, like a light to mid brown. With that, coming out with the limo, all that stuff, completely different music, and being a heel and repeating, I'm a wrestling god. I'm a wrestling god. And that's the thing about that. John, I don't know if you could look up exactly how long his title run was, but even outside of the title run, the JBL character lasted for years and constantly had a twist, constantly had a turn, constantly had somebody to work off of. And dare I say it, it was a smart idea to put the belt on John because you need it not only to establish John as a top guy, establish him as a champion, but most importantly, have a heel champion for people that want to buy tickets to see the heel champion finally lose to a babyface they care about. Babyface champions with Benoit and Guerrero, that could be another thing. And I've been independent champion on a few companies, and even on that level, when you have a babyface champion, it gets stale real quick. Real quick. Because guess what? People don't want to buy a ticket to go to a show or buy a pay-per-view to see someone retain the title. Deep down, they want to witness history and witness the title change. That's why a heel champion and a heel chasing a babyface is never going to draw as much as a babyface chasing a heel. Tommy Dreamer, number one example, not a title on the line. Dreamer chasing that elusive win for years and years and years against Raven. That's what drew. If Raven chased Dreamer trying to beat him, they're like, you're a piece of crap. You're a heel. We don't care about you. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Tommy shouldn't fight you. And Tommy keeps beating you. So I give John all the credit in the world, and you can call it the dark ages or whatever, but 21 years later at the time of this recording, and especially with the way the world is today, how many people have watched that JBL segment at the border kicking people back into Mexico? It's, for good or bad, you know what I mean? But he's a memorable character throughout the entire history of pro wrestling, not just WWE.
In the WWF, I know there was a bit of an anomaly because there was Hulk Hogan, Bruno, Pedro, even Cody Rhodes. They've all been long-time, high-drawing babyface champions as well. So, but for whatever reason, that seems to be an anomaly for them as well. Maybe the AWA in the 60s with Vern. But for the most part, it's always been the heel champion.
Well, it's a different model, though. You're talking about Bruno defending at the Garden in front of a bunch of Italian Americans, yeah. And they wanted him to win. It was different back then because people needed a hero to cheer for. In these days, I think it's more like we just selfishly want to witness history. I want to say I saw it at WrestleMania. I saw it at a house show, and there's no house shows anymore. So that's another thing. The model isn't driven by house show revenue. It's driven by TV licensing, merchandise, then maybe tickets, which they make their money on the tickets if you're interested in a SummerSlam front row seat.
$38,000. That's for both nights.
38 now?
Oh, it's $38,000, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 40.
No, I think it was always 30. Oh, people round up, don't they?
I mean, after the first 25, 30, who's counting, right?
After the first average wage of, the average American, I guess, or UK person, or whoever. One more thing to circle it back to Benoit. Do you think he was just far too limited to be world champion over the long term? I'm not talking about in ring, of course.
The only limitation is the fact what got him over was being that stoic, hard-nosed, like all business, all action type wrestler, right? High impact. That got him where he was. But what makes a world champion more than anything is what that guy said. Rocky. Let's look at Rocky. Rocky can work, but is Rocky the most like, I don't know, coordinated wrestler out there with are the punches the best? The people's elbow is whatever it is. But that just proves moves don't matter. What's the in-between? The spitting of the hand and the big one, the promos. Rock would do what Dusty Rhodes famously said. He talked people into the building. A champion and an over character talks people. Punk can talk people into the building. Paul Heyman can do it. Even when Brock was talking a little bit, getting people interested. Drew McIntyre can talk people into the building. That's the difference. Think about the people that just want to wrestle and don't care about being flashy. Bret Hart could cut a promo. As much as he gave himself a 3 or 4 in promos, they allowed Bret to speak his truth. And that came across as charismatic and real. So, yeah, Benoit's weak point was his promos. He could admit to that when he was alive. He did admit to it a couple times. But what are you going to do? Like, he concentrated on what brought him to the dance. And what he was lacking was exposed when he got to the top.
Let's move on. Another character of 2004 in the Ruthless Aggression era, Nick Dinsmore, a.k.a. Eugene. I'm glad we're talking about Nick Dinsmore because he occasionally will send, he'll make comments on videos of mine across all the channels and stuff like that. So he's still out there. He's got a YouTube channel as well. I think it's Eugene Behind the Scenes. So there you go. Free plug for you, buddy. Right, so he debuted in April of 2004 as Eric Bischoff's special nephew of some undetermined disability, I guess. He would crib the finishes of wrestlers like Hulk Hogan and The Rock and would be in some really major storylines in 2004 as well. He worked with The Rock, he worked with Eric Bischoff, his uncle, of course, in storyline. And, of course, he engaged in a feud with Triple H, which culminated... It didn't quite culminate in a loss at SummerSlam because there was one more match after that we could talk about of SummerSlam 2004. Now, while the fans of Toronto may have booed him there because it's Toronto, it's Bizarro World, you know how that goes, Nick really did a great job of portraying a character that could have so easily caused such an enormous backlash for, tastelessness and everything that goes along with that. But for some reason, he managed to portray Eugene sympathetically enough that everyone either bought into it or just enjoyed it. And I think he did like a load of Make-A-Wish, appearances as well, because, a lot of kids really, believe that character. So we'll talk a bit about Nick, if you would.
Yeah, obviously, Nick was a prodigy, and OVW was probably their top guy. And Cornette speaks about this, Nick Dinsmore turning into the special nephew Eugene and hating it beyond all belief. And I can understand from a wrestling purist like Cornette, just wants the wrestling, he loves promos and everything, but this kind of stuff can kind of offend certain people. I give WWE credit. I don't know if it was intentional. My guess is, knowing the way Vince and other people are, it was not intentional that he became a beloved character on the show. And I have no doubt he was doing Make-A-Wish and all these other things and became, maybe even in a work sense of being a special needs wrestler, he became a role model and somebody that can convey a message to other people in this position that you can do anything you want. You don't have to be limited by what you feel is a disability, you can still have a very fulfilling life and also fulfill your dreams. I don't know how Nick, you have to look at his YouTube channel. I'm sure he said how he felt when it was presented to him the first time, because Nick Dinsmore in OVW was the wrestling machine. He was a Benoit type wrestler. And dare I say, nobody talks about Nick Dinsmore in OVW, but everybody, if you say WWE Eugene, I bet you everybody remembered who was watching that or even heard about it. Did they take a chance? Yeah, but you know what? WWE needs to take chances these days a lot more than they do. And this was definitely something they scored on.
With Nick as well, they used to do, same with FCW after it, because a load of those report cards have come out recently and were posted. But in OVW, they'd have like an internal report card of like basically who was ready to go to the main roster. And Nick Dinsmore was always number one. And instead, WWE would pick 18, 19, and 20 because it was Sylvain Grenier or something like that, and they had a good body.
Can I ask you a question before you
yes.
continue? I remember, did you tell me, I believe it was you that told me that Al Snow got buried because Jim Ross was always putting Al Snow over in the meeting. So Vince said, okay, don't ever bring his name up. Could there be something like, oh, you think Nick Dinsmore's all that great? Okay, we're going to bring him up and give him this gimmick.
It could be. I don't know if they just didn't have the look they desired, or they just didn't want like a straight wrestler like a Benoit type, and they wanted a character instead.
But why they brought in, who was the other guy? Brent Albright. It wasn't his name in WWE, but around the same time, they brought Brent Albright in, who teamed with Benoit, and he was like a Benoit wrestler, and very plain and very vanilla, but did all the moves Benoit did. I think it was Brent Albright. I forget his name in WWE.
I think, was he not Brent Albright in WWE?
He might have been Brent Albright. I'm not sure.
Okay, all of his... Brent Albright, Gunnar Scott, Slater Vane, Smoke, Vance Vane, Vinny Valentino, Wayne Gator.
Was it Gunnar Scott in WWE?
It may have been Gunnar Scott. That sounds about right. I'm just looking. Yeah, Gunnar Scott.
You know why? Gunnar Scott, Gunnar Shooter. You see what I mean? That's why they picked it. But that was around the time Eugene was called up, so they weren't
2 years later.
Adverse.
It was 2006, Brent.
So after they refused to do that, they brought somebody in that could have did that Nick could have did the same
thing. The thing is,
gimmick.
they were doing in OVW, they had so many people, like Ron Waterman and guys like that. And, before then, you had names like Glenn Culker that used to be hanging around, the developmental that never made it.
I wrestled Ron Waterman on a dark match, and thank God it was a dark match.
How bad was it?
He's just a big jack dude. He's athletic in his own way, but in wrestling, you can have two left feet. Even if you're the most athletic football player, you get into a wrestling ring, it's an entirely different story. So I don't know. He wore like UFC type. Actually, he looked like
he was an
Goldberg
MMA
with blonde hair.
He was.
Yeah, I think he was. He looked like He wore the Goldberg black shorts, I think, with the white trim. Had gloves. He had bleached goatee and mustache and bleached hair. He was a super nice guy. So don't beat me up, Ron.
Well, we'll move on quickly then before he beats you up. So,
don't beat me up, Ron. Everybody else has. It's nothing special at this point.
We have to mention the Triple H feud. So with SummerSlam 2004, Triple H beat Eugene. I mean, it was not unexpected in fairness, but it was like, I think, his first big loss anyway. Then a few weeks later, I don't know if you remember this. If you don't, we'll just move straight on. A few weeks later, there was a cage match between Triple H and Eugene, where instead of it being a bit back and forth and Nick Dinsmore getting something, Triple H just beat him to death for 8 minutes straight and then just left the cage. He even teased leaving the cage just to come back in and then beat up Eugene more and then walk out again. And then from then on, Eugene sort of goes down to the mid-card and starts tagging. So it did feel like Triple H was very much just killing off that character after a while.
I do not remember that, but if I was watching it, I would say, yeah, that looks about right. What we said.
Now,
so he basically beat up a disabled person and said, I want to beat up a disabled person some more, and then I'm going to leave him in a cage.
Yes.
And the company booked a cage match with a special needs wrestler. Okay. You're teaching me how to look at it in a real world context of like, this is just goofy.
This is obscene.
Obscene is a good word. Abhorrent, as Vince would say.
Now, Eugene would remain on, obviously, the Raw roster active for a few more months. So while I read this out, because I know you've got to get the video up, so I sort of sprang this up on you as a bit of a what went wrong. New Year's Revolution 2005 pay-per-view from the WWE. It's a tag match featuring Eugene, and for the life of me, I didn't even write down who else it was. It doesn't matter what it was, but it's one of the weirdest injuries I've ever seen. It put him on the shelf for like 6 months. Nick Dinsmore, it did. So Nick is attempting a drop kick, and for whatever reason, just like a ligament in his knee goes. So, Stevie, what went wrong?
Okay, let's take a look at this. I don't remember this. I haven't seen it for some reason. Tomko is going to be featured a lot in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I guess. So let's play this. Then Christian. Ooh. Okay, so let's back it up right here. When he lands. His left knee. Right there. That's my only guess would be, and Nick would know, that's just right here. You can land that way 1,000,000 times. And here's his knee making impact right there. You can land that way 1,000,000 times with a drop kick. I talked about the Rob Van Dam baseball slide drop kick. Did 1,000,000 times before, probably even after. I think he went back to doing it. One baseball slide, one night, something in the ring, or the ring's not positioned, or the boards aren't there, or just a freak thing, ends up breaking his leg or having a severe leg injury. With Eugene here, I'm looking at it. I think it's literally, was it like the outside ligament is the MCL, correct? So the MCL and then the ACL is in the front, PCL, and I think the LCL is, I could get that backwards. But basically he's landing right on the outside of his knee, and that impact could have just had it pop, the ligament. So just a freak thing. Nobody did anything wrong here.
So it wasn't on the jump off then, you don't think?
No, I think it was on the impact, although I'm looking at his left knee right there. It's like, but they both look like they're bowed in a little bit. You see what I mean? Now he could have, here's just thinking of, I guess, the bright side of this. Usually when you throw a drop kick, you're turning and landing on your belly, chest, and your knees. Dare I say it, like maybe his knee was compromised, it was tweaked, got injured training, or it was just something was nagging on, and this was the final straw that popped it. But what if he landed flat on his chest, stomach, and his knees and blew his ACL out? That would be, did he blow his ACL, or was it ligament?
It just said ligament.
I'm assuming that outside ligament, or for all I know, he could have blew his ACL and other ligaments in this, and just the impact right there did it. Yeah, he's grabbing the front of his knee. You wouldn't grab the side, but the whole thing feels like it's on fire. So for all he knows, he did blow his ACL out. Oh, do you notice that right there? He doesn't even want to touch the ring with that knee. It's in so much pain right now. You see how he's turned over? He lifts the knee up. He's not even you've hurt your knee. Imagine just putting even a cup on your knee right after you tore it. You know what I mean? Right after you tore your ACL. The mere touch will make you feel like you're dying.
For people who've luckily not torn their ACL, which is most people here, that was one of the most painful things I've ever gone through in my entire life. And I landed just like that. I landed almost landed on my side. Now, the only thing I don't know if I did was if I landed on my side, but my foot was the wrong way round when I landed, and that's what sort of snapped the ACL. I figured that's what mine was, or it could have just been the impact that was so bad. But I'll tell you what, the one thing you do realise is how quickly your knee blows up. It swells like a cantaloupe, immediately afterwards. It's ridiculous, the swelling that happens. But yeah, I absolutely feel his pain.
Yeah, I hate the fact you're still dealing with that, because you're never the same after that. We've had talks about both our illness and injury and everything. Now, here's an interesting thing. He's drop kicking, and I've never quite seen the angle of somebody's legs like this. Usually you clear it, you do that. That's why when I was never great at drop kicking, I would drop kick kind of like this, but sometimes I would just mule kick like Ricky Morton does and take a back bump. because it's just safer to not have anything kind of pop out. But watch this as I go slow. You see how that knee is like that? And this leg is straight up. So like, could it have been that this force was coming down? And even though he turned his legs this way, the force of your knee literally being on a weird angle. Like, think about it. You got your knee, you land on it, you might bruise it or bruise your kneecap or do something. But there's those little parts, the indentations on each side of the kneecap, where you're kind of exposed to certain impact. Now, there could have been even something in the ring right here that came back up, like a loose ball or the board wasn't quite level. And that's all that needed to happen. Like, do you see the word? Like, he came down okay, but the second he came down, he curled up. Like, usually it'd be like, ow, you know what I mean? But when he came down and the impact happened, watch his body. Boom. And he didn't even like stretch out like you usually do with a drop kick to pop back up. You have to take it as, like, was his knee already banged up? Was there other stuff going on? Were the ligaments compromised? Did he lift heavy earlier that day or the day before with legs and it was just a little bit weaker? It could be a combination of all. It could be just sitting in an airplane seat for 4 or 6 hours and you got the, no room and your knees up against there and it's just locked up. Then you got to get right to the building and start working. There's a lot of different factors that come into this.
Is it safer to do a drop kick where you just take a flat back bump than a missile style drop kick where you turn over?
Obviously the mule kick drop kick doesn't look as good as what a Randy Orton or AJ or anybody can throw drop kicks, or obviously Bob Holly and other people. It looks more devastating. Plus the fact you can clear somebody if you drop kick them, and then by pushing against their chest or face, mostly the chest, if you literally drop kick them, when they go back, you create the space to take your bump on the other side. So with this being said, Tomko didn't do anything but fall back. Tomko didn't do anything but fall back instead of kind of like running into the drop kick, offering. I'm not saying it's Tomko's fault. It probably just happened as a freak accident. But more times than not, it's kind of like a clothesline. Remember we showed the one with Steve-O and his partner? That guy, he just bumped back instead of bumping all the way through underneath. Like if Tomko bumped and went straight, as Eugene had that resistance to clear. So maybe by the fact that Tomko just stood there and fell back, Eugene thought he would have that platform of his chest to turn over correctly and land. But then again, he could have landed on the top of the knee and blew everything out anyway. It really is a freak. This just proves, James and everybody, how dangerous it is, and it shouldn't be. Don't try this at home. Even the guys that do it in the ring after years and years of experience will end up getting injured. There's a 100% chance we will all get injured at least once in wrestling, if we're lucky.
Right, so we're going to go mention a couple more things about Eugene. So he would return in 2005, mid-2005, he would feud with Kurt Angle over the gold medal that Eugene would win in a match. And then, once again, SummerSlam, again, 2005 this time, Angle would win it, win the gold medal back. And then after that, Eugene's push was kind of diminished, and he was just, more in the mid-card, and eventually, he would just basically stop working with the main eventers, I guess. Is a character like Eugene, does it always have a shelf life?
Wow, that's an excellent question. Yeah, I mean, every character has a shelf life no matter what, unless you're really figured in and they always take care of the character. I think that's the difference. The creative team, Vince McMahon, management, they tire of the character, and I've talked about it before. Their internal clock as being part of the company and seeing Nick Dinsmore every single day and knowing he was an OVW for years, they have a different clock than a casual fan. And we're going to talk about Bischoff during this episode. Bischoff really was right on point when he said, You need a minimum of a consistent 6 months to start emotionally caring and investing in a professional wrestling character. In other words, that's why we had Savage back in the day. Local, little angle with George Steele. Oh, finally I can win the Intercontinental title, but he was in the company for maybe a year by the time that happened.
Yeah, it was mid-85.
At least 6 months.
So, yeah, I think he became champion in 86.
6 to 12 months before you really saw Savage as any kind of player. You saw him having potential, but you had to care about him one way or the other. Same thing with Eugene. Eugene could be on TV for 20 years if Vince McMahon thought he had a 20-year shelf life. But people can say whatever they want. Eugene or anybody else is determined to have the shelf life by other people. Triple H could have been the most boring wrestler ever. But I've said it before. King of Kings, the game, the music, the throne, the Terminator entrance, the motorcycle, the smoke and mirrors that every wrestler hopes to have to cover up any potential boring or boredom that the fans would have. Now, you can say every wrestler has the exact shelf life that the company determines they have. Now, obviously, there's some personal issues with Eugene or Nick Dinsmore after a while. I don't know if we're going to talk about that. That doesn't help. But in this vein, the Eugene character could have been a special needs version of John Cena that anybody could look up to.
Well, we've got R-Truth for that now. He's the special... Almost. But right, okay, just before we get off Eugene, I just want to tell the story that I read years ago. It was a fan-submitted story. And I can't remember the website, but I think it originally had a Virgil story of the week, and then it eventually grew to wrestler stories. And apparently a fan recollected that he saw Eugene at a public appearance with his tongue lolling out, and he was playing with a toy car and doing the whole thing. And the fan said, "You're so much better than this." And Nick just whispered, "I know." Just went straight back into character again. So if that's true, I really appreciate that. Right, we're going to move on again. And how can you talk about 2004 without talking about the Diva Search? WWE in 2004.
Well, we could.
No, we're not going
to. Could.
We're going to talk about it. So, Diva Search 2004 sort of kicked off in the summer, I guess, pretty much, or, late spring. I think it was the summer. How could WWE take beautiful women prancing around in bikinis and make it the worst segment that the fans, mostly male, booed every single week? Well, unsurprisingly, they managed it. This also was unsurprisingly John Laurinaitis' maybe first act after taking over from Jim Ross's WWE Vice President of Talent Relations. WWE Director Kevin Dunn was quoted before the Diva Search actually happened on Raw as a weekly segment. He claimed that the Diva Search would be classy. Here's the quote. "We want someone we can put on a pedestal here who can represent the WWE in a classy, I wouldn't say sophisticated, but a classy, nice manner. Each week, professional models would engage in awful skits and competitions and horrible promos on each other for a chance to win $250,000. Okay, so you know why I'm doing that in air quotes, don't you, Stevie?
Yeah, because it's $1,000 for $250-year contract.
Right. Basically it.
It's the Maven Tough Enough
Basically
deal.
It, yeah. I figured that's what was going on. So anyway, skits included seducing Kamala, selling ice cream, arm wrestling, wrestling in Chile, I guess, boxing with giant gloves on, a pie-eating contest with The Rock, who couldn't make that segment good. And he hadn't been seen in months as well. People were really happy to have him back, and that's how they used him. And then it also featured Christy Hemme sitting on a pie because her, quote, butt was hungry. I'm pretty sure there was a South Park episode based on that as well. There was Dis the Diva, which involved the women all ganging up on Carmella and calling her a skank and a whore who was sleeping with people in WWE to get ahead. Some of the quotes, which you might want to bleep, Chris, include, I've written cock, but it's actually cock-sucking gutter sluts. And from Amy Weber to Carmella again, you don't have any respect for the WWE. You don't know shit about wrestling. Having a cock in your mouth has nothing to do with wrestling, bitch. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of bleeping there. But before we get to the notable women, do you remember the issue at SummerSlam 2004 when the Diva Search contestants beat the actual WWE women at dodgeball? And there was a massive issue over it.
Yes, I do. And I remember, I think they took Ivory to Wrestler's Court for that, correct? Hey, I want to say something. Was this not a cry for help from Vince McMahon, but was this showing how many computer brains that this maniac had, that these things that, I mean, this potentially was 19 NDAs right here, this entire Diva Search. Do you think this is a peek into the mind of Vince
there's
McMahon?
A wine called 19 Crimes. That might as well be Vince's biography at this point.
19 in parentheses if you're lucky, or that I
19
know
NDAs.
of, or that we know of. No, but I'm looking at this and like, you're humiliating these women in public, and this is very much sounds like a lot what we're seeing with the Janelle Grant type stuff off and on.
You never turned up to the Wrestlers Court things, did you? Did you avoid them?
No, I didn't even know. I was in the concourse playing video games.
Fair enough then. I'm going to give you some of the notable names that were in. Eventual winner, Christy Hemme. A quick word on some of the names I'm going to give. But Christy Hemme, she always seemed, at least on TV, she seemed like an actually really nice person.
Very nice, very nice. I got to know her a little better in TNA, and she was always very nice. You know, and I'm sure the butt-hungry pie-eating thing was just to stand out as something we're still talking about in 2025.
Next name is apparently the object of everyone's scorn was Carmella de Cesar. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she wrestled, or at least briefly appeared at Taboo Tuesday 2004 and then released. I remember that. It was like a pillow fight or something like that, but they threw her in.
Was this Carmella that was married to Jeff Garcia, the football player?
I can look.
I believe that this Carmella was the person that was dating and eventually married Jeff Garcia. He was a quarterback in the NFL. So I'm looking. I didn't know her last name. I just remember a Carmella.
Jeff Garcia, yeah. Well done.
Okay. Not today, CTE.
So she was in for a very short amount of time, so I don't know if there's any real stories about her. The next name is Amy Weber. Now, there is a story with her. She became a member of JBL's cabinet, but was fired after complaining about WWE's frat house environment. Would you believe?
I'm a total shock. I don't even know anything about this. I was in the concourse the whole time.
So this is actually off of Wikipedia. The quote's actually there. She claimed she was bullied by the likes of Edge and Randy Orton, basically for being a Diva Search person, not really knowing what's going on, and said the following: "So when I got to Alaska, Shane McMahon was there. We were all getting our bags, and I was done. I just felt like I couldn't continue to be in an environment where people had no respect for me. They had their reasons, but I don't think taking 2 ibuprofen is a reason for someone to call you names, try to physically harm you, and then pour a drink in your face." So that's the story.
I'm not familiar with the pouring a drink in the face and the 2 ibuprofens, but this is where the real world meets the wrestling bubble, by the way. We talked about this, and then people in the wrestling world will say, well, she had a bad attitude and she couldn't take it. And but that these people you brought in for the Diva Search were not divas on the roster. They were models that were found in a magazine. But hey, look at this one, Vince. This looks good.
What do you mean? You can't take relentless bullying? What do you mean? It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is. I mean, how dare you not let us treat you like crap? But that's the wrestling business. Dude, I'll give you a preview. The number one question I was asked when they put the dress and the wig on me during this time, what do you think it was? I think I've told you already.
What was your punishment? What did you do?
No, what did you do? What did you do? I'm
sorry,
wrong?
I said that badly. Yeah, what did you do to deserve this punishment is what I meant.
Well, there you go. So Amy Weber, how dare you call us out and say that we're treating you like crap? Now we're going to treat you like crap because you said we treated you like crap. Welcome to wrestling, everybody.
Next name, Joy Giovanni. She stuck around for a year. She made several more appearances after the fact between the late 2000s and late 2010s as well in WWE. So any stories about Joy, I guess?
No, when it came to all this stuff, it was a completely different kind of segment. And I had my own battles to fight, by the way, as we just talked about. So for all I know, I think I might have been hiding out for all this because I would say, if they see me anywhere near the divas, especially in the dress and the wig, no, that's going to be a whole another level of being made fun of, even by civilians. People that aren't in the wrestling business.
The next name, very familiar to everybody in wrestling, I'm sure, Maria Kanellis. She actually stuck with the business and is still associated with it. So it's good to know that at least one person sort of made a real proper career out of pro wrestling, and she really loves it.
And Maria's an awesome girl. She's a nice girl. She's super nice. Super nice. But once again, this is a girl, from what I can remember, a couple times that stood up for her business with WWE. And then what did you do wrong, Maria? I can't think of the exact things, but just didn't want to be treated a certain way. And they were pissed at, they get so pissed off if you don't allow them to do what they want to do. And when you complain about it, it's mystifying. Watch Shawshank Redemption. That might explain a few things. I think it does.
I probably didn't do it, not that it was her fault, of course, but she played a ditzy character on television, at least initially, as well. So I suspect that a lot of people would have just taken her for that character as well. So that wouldn't have done her any favours, I guess, with some of the people in the locker room.
Yeah, but she was anything but that. And that probably got her heat. Like, how dare you not be stupid?
One more name to mention, Michelle McCool. Eliminated in 7th place, but ended up having the biggest WWE career as she won the WWE Divas title and went on to marry The Undertaker and then somehow get a WWE Hall of Fame induction in 2025. I will never get over that one.
It's fine. It's a wrestling business. It's subjective. Everybody works hard. The money and the miles are the same. Everybody suffers. Everybody pays their dues. Michelle's bumps, they hurt every bit as much as Undertaker's or Cena or anybody else, but it's all up to somebody to say, yeah. I mean, I'm still so flabbergasted Triple H got in the Hall of Fame. I don't know how that happened.
Well, he had no idea,
It was such a shock. What's this big building doing here? I didn't see it being constructed for 5 years.
Ivory on the Divas contest. This is why I love Ivory. One of the few people I really want to have on WSI, never got to speak to her. This was while the contest was still happening, she gave this quote. The Raw Divas are in a bad spot right now. It seems like as hard as we work to bring integrity and interest into the women's division, the WWE creative team, or whoever the mystery people are who make rotten decisions and storylines, etc., work against us. The Diva Search is unentertaining, unimaginative, and a total waste of what each of the contestants could probably bring to our program. Instead of a contest/reality show, WWE is giving us Jackass meets Top Model. Oh, what a quote. Well done.
Yeah, I'm glad that WWE didn't really read that quote because I just had my life flash before my eyes and say, let's put 4 people that we don't like together in dresses and wigs and call them the mystery people. But yeah, I mean, this is after the Ivory. Let's think about it. Ivory and I did the WrestleMania 17 match with China, and that whole angle with China made the women look different with China, Ivory, all the other ones. Then there was another kind of renaissance period with Ivory being involved, Jazz, Molly Holly, Trish Stratus, Victoria, all these different things. This is where you go after all that. So the girls had to be like, maybe even just saying to themselves, I'm out the first chance I get if this is what this company, and Ivory would be the one to say, no, I'm not doing that. And kept her job. I give her credit. She just spoke her mind all the time. She's the one to call me fat and got me to lose all the weight. So she's always been a brutal straight shooter, which the business absolutely hates.
Yeah, well, she'd be let go a year later. Let go. The company WWE opted not to renew her contract. Anything else to say about the WWE Diva Search? I mean, was it a curtain sellout or a monitor sellout in the back to watch just how ridiculous this all went? Or was it just everyone hated it? What did everyone think in the back is what I'm saying.
It did. Yeah, it could definitely be a monitor sellout. I definitely believe that, but I wasn't anywhere near it. I was just trying to plan my escape route after Heat or Velocity.
So, one more as well. Were there any wrestlers that you dare name that immediately made a beeline and were sniffing around the Diva Search contestants?
Not that I saw. I would assume the answer is 100% yes, that there were some. And maybe maybe saying no to them was part of the heat for some of them. That's just my guess and my speculation. But if you're a famous wrestler and you can pretty much get anybody you want and somebody says no to you, that's probably not a good thing for your ego. So I don't know. And I don't know if there's any edict or talent meeting. I'm assuming the usual suspects that the company knew about, that management knew about, they had already pulled them into the office before any of these girls walked into a building and said, hey, don't do it. Because the office did do that sometimes, because beyond whatever it was with the frat house environment, the office still had to worry about these girls are completely clueless about the wrestling business, but we don't want a lawsuit. We don't want a sexual harassment case or a sexual assault case. Don't think they weren't aware of all that stuff, because they were. Vince had tons of computer brains working on this, trying to figure it out.
Well, apparently Carmella had done something, because every single one of the Diva Search contestants zoned on her and said the exact same thing. So I'm wondering if she had made it known, or some rumor had got out there that she was trying to, pardon the pun, get ahead in the contest kind of thing.
I have no idea. It wasn't with me. That's all I can guarantee you.
Okay, so next on the agenda in mid to late, autumn of 2004, the dress code is once again implemented in WWE. There hadn't been a dress code for, a dozen years, maybe more, probably. I think there was one implemented maybe in the late 80s, and then it was done away with after not too long of a time. But this is from, and I'm sorry I did a copy and paste here because I just couldn't write it any better, from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. John Laurinaitis is starting to get heat that Jim Ross used to get that is natural for his position. Which he just not usurped, but taken over his role, I guess, Jim Ross's role as talent relations vice president for WWE. He told everyone that, no exceptions, there is a $250 fine for being late and even more for dress code violations. You are supposed to wear nice slacks, nice shirts at all times while travelling, and believe me, there is a lot of heat on that one, since many see this, and I can see the point of view that they feel management is not addressing the real problems that had gotten the lack of popularity where it is, while they're worrying about unimportant things like that, like wrestlers, what they're wearing on planes, etc. in the summer. It's the mentality from the past that if people see you dress like a bum, they won't pay to see you. And the dress code fine system was $500 for a first offence, $1,000 for a second offence, and the suspension for a third offence. There have already been several first-time offenders already, including some top stars. So the dress code, Stevie.
Yes, the dress code. And I admittedly, looking back on it, should have dressed a little bit better. Sometimes I could probably dress a little bit better now. So we're trying to work with clothing companies to bring me up to 2025. But traveling is a very uncomfortable thing. And I know a lot of people that travel for business and pleasure. And there's a lot of business people that travel in their suits. Some do not, but they carry it in a garment bag and they change to it when they get to wherever they're going to do their work. I remember the talent meeting vividly, although I'm going to paraphrase one of the quotes. I don't have the exact quote. You might have it up in a news article, James. We sat down, and this was a time where, like you said, the business was down. We didn't know how much it was down, but we knew business was down. And all they kept doing was trying to do these different fixes that were absolutely unimportant to the actual product. But I do believe dress code, or at least having a basis for taking pride in the way you looked, is very important. Now, back in the 80s, didn't Savage and other people dress almost in their gimmick when they were walking through an airport? They were larger-than-life characters that would have, Jim Duggan. I don't know if he could walk through an airport, but he'd have the 2x4 with him all the time. They would have their characters really aligned with what you see on TV. Just my guess. But I remember the talent meeting. Johnny Ace came in, and this is in the era of 6 months. If you don't hold the tag rope on house shows and TVs, you're going to get fined. If you don't do this in a match, we're only limiting to this move, or if 2 people work the arm. It started to inch closer to what mattered to make each match stand out, but it was still it's almost like middle management justifying their position by showing, look how I'm coming down on the employees, Vince. Look at this. I'm putting rules in place. But I remember the dress code. There was the rumblings about this and people were complaining. We sat in the meeting. They started to do the worst analogy ever. And this is where I give Chris Jericho credit. This is where I'm going to paraphrase his quote towards the end. Johnny, like everybody likes my Johnny Ace impression. Hey, we got people in the NFL and NBA and MLB, everybody, professional athletes are dressing up on the team planes and going around. Now he's saying charter planes, team planes, you know what I mean? Different than we're flying commercial and economy. They dress up in suits and go to the games and they're walking there and they're looking like $1 million. And they said something like to the effect of, we want you to look like these athletes and football players, basketball players that are making multiple millions of dollars per year. They literally said they're making this money and they look like it and they look like stars. And Jericho said something to the effect of, yeah, well, why don't you pay us that money too? It's something like shut everything down. And Johnny gave his, oh, okay, Chris got it, like whatever. But I'm paraphrasing, but Chris came back with what everybody was thinking. You're comparing us to all these people making millions upon millions of dollars, traveling on, very comfy charter planes with the big seat. You're not jammed in like a sardine in a can, but you want us to give the illusion. You don't want to pay us like it, but the illusion that you are paying us like that. Now, here's where I'm saying I opened with what? Admittedly, I could have dressed more professionally. I could have did more to make myself look like I take pride in the way I look. Now, that I dress like a bum? No, but sometimes you get to the building from the gym, you're wearing gym clothes. But some people were saying, shower at the gym, put your dress clothes on so people see you from the gym to the building, even if the building's 5 minutes away. It started to be so micromanaged in that way. Even one time I was just like, Glenn's like, we don't even have time to get changed. I go, no problem. So I did cardio in my dress code clothes for an hour and then went to the building soaked with a polo, dress pants, and dress shoes and white socks. So wouldn't give it up.
Good.
But I see both sides of it, but don't start talking. This is where the boys got turned off. I knew what they were trying to say, and it was like, whatever. But the boys got turned off because you want to compare us to professional athletes or even movie stars and people like that, but you're still treating the talent like we're working the indies in a lot of ways. So that's what I think caused a lot of the resentment towards the office. Also was like, can we just try to draw money? Can we just try to make the storylines better? Can you write some stuff to make everybody get over? Can we move some merch? Like, I can see guys like, there wasn't even anything where it was like, hey, if you have a shirt that we're trying to sell, wear that everywhere so people will see you in the shirt and buy. No, that was, so you want us to take anybody wearing merch. You don't want us to wear our shirts or like, oh, that's a cool new shirt. I want to buy it. No, dress clothes across the board and that's it.
Did you ever get fined?
No, never got fined. Who
got fined the most?
I don't remember. I don't know if they ever implemented a fine. I assume they did. No one definitely got suspended for dress code. They got suspended for a lot of other things. But no, I don't know about a fine. I think it was maybe warnings at first. I think they tried after they said that. You're trying to, I understand teams. I understand players and teams and other things like that. But wrestling is such an independent sport and each personality is different. So in other words, what you're trying to do is say, hey, we want you to go out there and have fun. And that was the end of the meeting, by the way, after all that. Hey, everybody go out there and have fun. It's like, you're trying to take everybody's individuality and uniqueness away and making everybody dress the same. You can't have it both ways.
Speaking of everyone dressing the same, weren't there a couple of exemptions?
I would assume Austin and other people were exemptions. I remember famously, if I'm recalling correctly, further down the line, Undertaker talked to CM Punk and said, hey, you need to dress up, blah, blah, blah. And he was essentially wearing the same exact thing Cena wears. And he literally said, well, what about Cena? And that got him. He's a miracle, man. He spoke his mind and actually got more of a push instead of getting buried. Good for him.
Yeah, but the Undertaker's the one I'd written down. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think John Cena may have been the other one as well at the time. Who dressed the best before this was implemented? Did anyone actually turn up in a suit who didn't need to?
Well, I would say, I mean, definitely Vince. Vince would always turn up in a suit. Flair and Hunter, I think, Flair was there during that time, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Flair, Hunter, but think about it. That's their gimmick. And if this is around the Evolution time, I'm sure they talked to Batista and Randy Orton and said, you have to dress like us. Now it makes sense. But then again, you're telling everybody to dress like that. How's Evolution going to stand out?
Right, okay, so I said this on the Dutch recording, the Dutch Mantel recording yesterday. I don't know if it's out on Wednesday or if it's out on Sunday, but weirdly, this subject came up. And then just as I was, coming up with things to write about for this format, it came up again. My memory is that Gene Snitsky was photographed coming to an arena with a giant yellow SpongeBob SquarePants t-shirt. And that photo got onto the WWE.com website and Vince was furious. Now, I know that happened. I cannot find the photo, but I don't know if that was anything to do with implementing the dress code. I think Snitsky might have been a few weeks late as far as like coming onto the main roster. Maybe I'm going crazy there, but I seem to remember, at the very least, Vince McMahon was furious about that getting out.
But then he loved Balls Mahoney a couple of years later.
Yeah, of course he did.
who had tattered everything. How about this? We'll do the SpongeBob meme. Here, watch this. No one cares. I just think it's ridiculous that a monster like Snitsky that looks like he could tear you apart and is the most miserable human being ever is wearing the most like upbeat type of cartoon character.
Oh, but he looked like a complete idiot in that t-shirt. It was one of the, and the thing was, it was entirely yellow. It wasn't like a picture of SpongeBob SquarePants. It was entirely yellow with just the face and eyes and things.
His entire face and body was the t-shirt all around, correct?
Yeah. Yes. It was hideous. And I'm not sure I'd be annoyed like Vince was, but I can see where it's coming from on that one. Now, let's move on. Dr. Tom Prichard. One of my... spoke to him loads of times. So not loads of times, but quite a few times over the last few years. Always a pleasure, that guy. What a brain on him he has for wrestling. Now, he was fired in the autumn of 2004, I think around the beginning of September, and it was a huge surprise. Once again, this is from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. I apologise, I don't usually like quoting that, but here's what it is. In what was a big surprise to almost everybody, Tom Prichard was released this past week. Prichard, 45, had been with the company for nearly 10 years, ever since he and Jimmy Del Rey left Smoky Mountain Wrestling for WWE as the Heavenly Bodies tag team. His background, besides pro wrestling from the age of 20, well, we know his background, and he worked with, in WWE, I'll give you the bridge version, Heavenly Bodies, then he did the Body Donners with Chris Candido and Tammy Sitch, then he transitioned into a trainer, more of a backstage personality, would still wrestle on TV occasionally, including, at one point, I'm pretty sure he was the Blue Blazer. He was one of many people who portrayed the Blue Blazer
in late 1998.
I
didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, well, Coco Beware did once.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. I actually counted once. I think there was 7 or 8 people who did the Blue Blazer in like a 3-month period.
The Coco one's pretty ingenious in a way. Who is this man? Who is he?
That was one of Russo's best gags. I'll give him that one, absolutely. So anyway, Prichard was with WWE for years. He was the initial trainer for WWE. He was their in-house trainer in '96. He trained The Rock and Mark Henry.
I remember that. Kurt Angle, too. Everybody that came through there, it was called Tracks.
Yeah, but this was even before they had everybody in. As far as I know, it was The Rock, then Mark Henry, or one way or the other, and then Brackus was the third one.
Yep. I remember that building, actually, because I went there a couple of times, obviously, before I even signed with the company when I was still with ECW. And you want to talk about dead cold in an old WWE ring, no energy whatsoever, the hardest way you can train. It's kind of just in their factory, or the warehouse, I should say, where they keep stuff. Man, it was hard. I mean, if you're going to be able to show emotion and like last conditioning wise through that, you're ready.
So Tom, he would make it back to WWE and be a trainer in FCW for quite a long time. He may have even been a trainer in NXT briefly as well before he was let go again. But that being said, any memories of Tom Prichard in WWE?
Yeah, actually, the FCW thing is the main story. When I went down there to train, they were going to offer me a job to be a trainer with Steve Kern and himself, work underneath them. Obviously, they have way more experience. And I just remember being in the gym with Tom, and I just got such a weird vibe that he was very unhappy with. I think they were trying to transition to NXT, and maybe his days were numbered once again. And, you know, the people are going through a bunch of stuff. You just don't know. But at that particular time, he didn't seem like the guy I saw before nor after that day. But I remember there was a lot of tension there and a lot of things going on. Even Steve seemed distracted. It was a very tight building. Like, they had multiple rings, but you literally had to shuffle. The wall was literally almost right there where the rings were, and then go into the office. It was essentially in an industrial park, I think, and a couple buildings or a couple kind of office units or whatever you would call it. And fast forward many years later, I still talk to Glenn Jacobs. He and Tom are running the wrestling school in Knoxville together. I think it's the Prichard Jacobs Wrestling Academy or Jacobs Prichard. So through Glenn, I check in to see how Tom's doing, but I haven't talked to him. I think I may have saw him at one convention after that FCW thing, and that was about it. And that conversation with him, by the way, I was leaning towards doing that, but in the very end, I was like, there's something not right about this. I'm going to continue to be a full-time worker. And my grandmom was very sick at the time, too, so I had to stay close to Philadelphia as well.
Have you ever heard of the joke where you would people would say they would take a bullet for Tom and then put it in Bruce?
Yes, 100 times. I think I might have been one of the first said that. No, I'm not. Yeah, it was like I would take a bullet.
Completely different people.
But Nova said that all the time. I would think literally it was I would take a bullet for Tom Prichard and I would give a bullet to Bruce Prichard.
Are they just completely different people? Because they sound exactly the same.
Yeah, and so I mean, you would think that they like learned how to speak from the Roddy Piper School of Phonics or whatever, you know, Roddy on Phonics or whatever, we'll go hooked on Phonics. but they sound like a Roddy Piper promo sometimes if you think about it. Hey, both have great minds. Both are incredibly charismatic in their own way. They just have different interactions with the professional wrestling talent and maybe even the fans. I don't know.
Let's move on to Eric Bischoff. Now, we can't really talk about, especially with WWE Raw in this time period, we can't talk about Ruthless Aggression without Eric Bischoff, who was the GM, the storyline general manager, for pretty much the entirety of that run. You know, he was there for over 3 years, I think he was general manager. So, on WWE Raw, the episode actually before Unforgiven 2004, Eric Bischoff is stripping Edge of the Intercontinental title due to the 30-day rule, where you've got to defend it every 30 days. Don't belly laugh at me, Stevie.
I thought it was because he threw somebody over the top rope, like Bill Watts.
No, he didn't hang on to the tag rope
long
enough for that 6 months. No, anyway, Adam Copeland, Edge, had suffered a groin injury, so that's why he was stripped. But I just think it's funny that the 30-day rule, and then we have like Roman Reigns, or had Roman Reigns not defending the title for like 4 months at a time. But anyway, once again, throughout the Ruthless Aggression era, Eric Bischoff was the WWE Raw general manager. Now, we've never talked about Eric. Have we ever talked about Eric on this show?
I think I made mention sometimes to some things, but never in great detail about Eric. But his first time coming in, I mean, you can imagine. I mean, he was trying to put WWE out of business. I give Vince a ton of credit for that, introducing him and hugging him on the stage. I mean, you got to think about, he literally was going to put WWE out of business for a time. They were taking the water coolers out. They were cutting back. He was fighting for the company's financial life. And for Vince to turn around and still want to do business, come on, man. How many people could do that? You say whatever you want about Vince McMahon. He can see an opportunity to make money by bringing Eric Bischoff into WWE. Now, on a personal level with the talent, that's where I didn't witness everything. The only thing I witnessed was Flair wanting to fight him. And Flair, red in the face, yelling and screaming at him, and Bischoff very calmly. I may misremember some of that or how long it went, but Flair was not happy. And Eric was very cool, calm, and collected. The only thing that I had personally was I personally apologized to Eric in catering for leaving WCW the way I did. And he just said everybody has their situation and everything, no harm, water under the bridge. I shook his hand and that was it. The Flair thing, that's all the detail I know, that Flair was hot, that Bischoff was there.
I hate to say future episode for the WCW thing, because we are going to revisit WCW in that the glorious run you had in WCW.
Thank you.
At that time. I
Industry changing. It was like it wasn't even as long as a Benoit or Guerrero title reign.
How often did you... I mean, I guess you would have worked with him in TNA as well, but how often did you interact with Eric in the WWE days? And here's another question. Did he have any idea what you were doing for Heat?
No.
At the time?
Had no idea. That's my guess. Why would he? He has so much other stuff to do. He was figured in each and every week. He might have walked by and saw me working Heat, but so what? The only interaction I had in detail with Eric outside of sitting down, apologizing, shaking his hand, and I got up and walked away, let him have. And he was sitting alone, dude. So you can imagine he was in a lot more stressful of a situation. And that's why I figured, well, if I go up to him, now's the time. At least it's not going to be anything where he's going to be. I didn't know how he would react, honestly, but I figured at least.
Was that day one? Was that day one that you apologized?
That was day one. Yeah, sitting in catering, all alone, dude. Big round table towards the door, and then you had everything kind of, the food, the people. He was on a literal island from what I could see. So I just said, even if he wasn't like potentially had heat with the talent, which he probably did, at that time, I figured this was the best time to go up to him, talk to him for 2 minutes, get the closure on it. He could tell me to F off or whatever. I walk away. I worked an independent in Nashville, Tennessee for my buddy Julian Bradley, now he's a senator up in Wisconsin. He ran the show, and I worked Aramis Stinson on this show. We had a really, I thought it was a good match, but I didn't think it stood out in any way. It was just your standard match. It was the only time, the second time in my career, I'll talk about the one in WCW, my awesome run there, the era of Stevie Richards. Eric pulled me aside and said, I watched every second of that, and I enjoyed it so much. And that's what wrestling matches should be. And that finish and the way you guys worked and the pace and the gears. He goes, I just want to let you know, I really enjoyed that match. And then that meant a lot that he even watched it. For all I know, he was just kind of like walking by, saw it, and it caught his eye. The time before that is when we started in WCW. It was Daytona Beach. It was one of the bars at the hotel. Raven went down to talk to Eric about something. I was there, and Eric said, yeah, he might have made Raven mad because Raven was trying to politic and pitch stuff. And Eric looked at me, and obviously Eric was trying to do everything he can to piss WWE off or WWF off. He was like, you look a lot like Shawn Michaels. He goes, I think I can do something with you. And he goes, we'll have fun. Just let me think on it. And Raven's like, hey, what about me? Never, you know what I mean? Forevermore and all that. He went back to talking to Raven. That was like a minute where he was like, I could do something with you. And that was pretty cool. And that probably blew a hell of an opportunity, or maybe an opportunity to never work in WWF if that angle and character went through. I have no idea what he was planning to do, but see, the thing is, I never had Eric in a meeting where Raven walked out where he said, if you don't like it here, get out. I never had to go to my son's college wrestling tournament for Eric to say, you're fired. I've never been in that situation. So he and I have never had cross words, and really, why would we? The only thing I hate and I'm jealous of is the fact that he lives in Wyoming, basically at the base of the Yellowstone River, and that's my dream in retirement. You and I have talked about buying our land and getting Starlink and running the show from there.
Yeah. I want to say our land, Stevie and his wife's land, by the way. Now, Because you mentioned his debut, I've got a couple of follow-up
I
questions.
thought you were
Apart
chipping
from
in
Ric
for the
Flair,
land. Thanks a lot.
hell no. Oh, wow, we expect me to. I'll chip in for the Starlink. How about that?
Oh, okay, great. I'll get the 100 acres of my own. You can handle half of a $99 a month.
With that big, okay, who else had issues with Eric, do you think, apart from Flair? Did you notice anyone?
I didn't notice anybody, but there was a lot of interviews between the time WCW went under. These people went to WWE and then did subsequent interviews as the internet was starting to gain traction. I would say the stigma of Eric, you can imagine, I give him credit for being incredibly courageous after everything he did, not only to step into a locker room with the talent and everything that may have had cross words with him back in the day when he was in power, but also like, okay, Vince is starting me out as GM. When's the F coming? When am I going to get screwed? When's he going to mess with me? And those days did come, throwing him in the dumpster, Austin beating him up. Hey, think about Austin. The FedEx firing in WCW. Wasn't that during the Bischoff regime? Yeah.
95. Yeah.
95.
Yeah.
That's when he came to ECW. So think about all that. But you know what the overarching example is? Heat really does always pass. People that are mortal enemies are now sitting at a round table for WWE Network and reliving the good old days in front of each other. Think about Bischoff and Mick Foley. Think about a ton of people that now they can coexist and actually have a civil conversation with each other. Maybe, dare I say it, become friends. Isn't it crazy?
Okay, here's the thing.
Meaning Hunter and I could be
before,
best workout buddies someday.
Maybe.
Probably not.
No, probably not. I mean, with his heart, if nothing else. Anyway, because you were saying this beforehand, and immediately maybe just doing the show with you so many times, it made me immediately jump. Can you believe that Vince hired Eric Bischoff, even though they hated each other, and Bischoff wanted to put him in WWF, WWE, and Vince out of business? And I was thinking, that's probably exactly why Vince hired him.
Well, please expand on your reasoning. What would be I mean, the petty reason and maybe the reason of respect. Like he might be like, I respect this dude for trying to put me out of business.
Yeah, but you know, you're always like, it's the same with Ultimate Warrior. It's the same with Bruno. I mean, it's just maybe even just a point to prove that he can mend these fences, or the company can mend fences with people who have sworn up and down that they will never deal with them again, like Bruno, and it ended up being Triple H who taught Sammartino into the Hall of Fame. And I mean, it cost WWE a lot of money because Bruno felt WWF or WWF had screwed him out of a load of money back in the 80s, I guess. So it cost him a lot of money to make it up to him, and then, you know, they had a better, more fruitful relationship in Bruno's final years. Before we move off Eric, why was Vince and Eric immediately aligned in storyline? Because I just think, I know why Eric didn't go a year earlier in the invasion. He was offered, and Eric was happy just out of the business for a bit. By his own admission, his hair was grey because his hair's naturally grey, and he was fat because he'd just been living the good life for months after being let go, and he just didn't want to appear on TV. So, you know, he was feeling self-conscious. It wasn't the right time, but he would have been great in the invasion. But then a year later, Eric Bischoff turns up, and then immediately, it's almost like you could have almost done the invasion part 2, but it would have actually been good because Flair was there, and Scott Steiner would be there in a few months, and Goldberg would be there the next year. Kevin Nash had returned from injury, that kind of thing. Could have brought Scott Hall back. It could have been Invasion Part 2, but done well. Why instead throw cold water on that immediately?
Well, I would dare disagree to some point and give you a different timeline. In a way, Eric's smart because Eric's looking at 50 different people and nobody stands out except for Austin in the very end, right? Nobody stood out in the invasions. How will Eric Bischoff, just being another guy who's in power with people that aren't winning anything, if you think about it? I feel like if they never did the invasion angle and they really wanted to bring in the stars, and the initial thing was to basically have WCW as a separate television show, separate brand, bring them together at maybe the Rumble and WrestleMania, and Bischoff runs the promotion again, and it's separate. Now you have Eric Bischoff's team or Eric Bischoff's top guys against Vince's top guys, even Survivor Series. That's where I think Bischoff, but there's still that thing. In the very end, nobody can be better than Vince. Nobody can be better than WWE. Anybody that comes from another promotion has to pay their dues, has to pay their penance, and then in the end, they pay their penance again because they're not as good as the homegrown WWE talent. Am I off base with that?
Sting, 2015, and they couldn't get over it.
Yep, they never will get over it. And I guarantee you, I'm so shocked that I'm still shocked Cody got the push he did out of AEW but now they're proving a point of now that the business is completely exposed and will be more exposed with the writer's show. Now what they're doing is WWE saying, we're going to draw money and make this guy a millionaire and make $1 billion off him and prove that you don't know how to push your guys. There's a whole different motivation.
Yeah, at least that's a more healthy motivation.
Oh, yeah, you can,
too,
yeah.
I guess.
Hey, Vince, I was in AEW. I heard $1 million. Screw them. Screw them.
You were in Ring of Honor.
I was.
Which AEW now owns.
I was so actually, if you think about it, the Stevie Richards Ring of Honor run was right up there with the legendary WCW.
We'll have to compare them in a future episode.
I think I just did.
We've got all the gimmicks in there. One more thing before we go on to the news, and a lot of people are very interested to hear what you've got to say about the news as well, a couple of different things. But before we do, one more thing in the Ruthless Aggression era, and this is sort of, because you mentioned Ric Flair before, back on July 26th of 2004, and I've always wanted to talk about this, so I'm glad you're here with me as someone who probably, quite frankly, didn't see it. In the Mellon Arena in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Ric Flair and Bruno Sammartino basically had a mythical non-confrontation when they both claimed they were snubbed by the other person. Bruno claimed that Flair slinked away, I guess, however you want to say it, from Bruno when Flair saw him backstage, and then Ric Flair said that Bruno refused to shake Ric Flair's hand after Ric had basically crapped all over him in his autobiography that was either out that year or the year before. I can't remember if it was 2003 or 2004. Do you know anything of this backstage incident?
I do know about it in retrospect because Bruno did an interview that I watched. By the way, I was always a big fan of Bruno. He was such a gentleman. Even when he came to independent shows, he would always come to visit Tom Brandy and other people, and I would be there. I got to find a picture. We have a picture of all of us, and I'm just like a little kid with Bruno. And talking to Bruno, he was always just a normal person in wrestling. That's what he felt like to me. I don't know any dealings when he worked, politics, any of that stuff. But I do remember the interview talking about this at the Mellon Arena. And basically, Bruno, from my recollection of the interview, had brought a camera crew, a local camera crew. He was being interviewed. I guess they were doing some sort of piece on him or documentary type thing. And he was busy with that. And there was part of him that said he didn't even see Ric Flair in the same vicinity. Am I remembering this correctly?
You tell me.
That this is just based on an interview that I saw on YouTube with him where he said, I didn't even see him. And then he talked about the autobiography and he goes, why would I shake his hand when he buried me? Or he spoke negatively about me. Why would I shake someone's hand that did? So he didn't admit to doing it because he was so busy with the camera crew. But then again, why would he? So he's saying, yeah, Flair, and Flair's instincts probably would be, why would I go up to, and why would Flair go up to Bruno knowing he buried him? And Bruno knowing Flair buried him in the book. Because Bruno stayed up with this stuff to some degree. He was aware of it. Ric Flair, there's a compilation from, TSN, the Canadian Sports Network, and that guy who interviewed all the wrestlers back in the day, and Vince. Where,
off the record or something.
Yeah, off TSN, off the record. And he would bury everybody, Brad and Hogan, and it was like literally Ric Flair buries the world type thing. There's a Bret Hart version too of buries the world. But
I've got one for you that really bugged me about Ric Flair. This was in 2003 or something like that. He was doing an interview
he buried Mick
with
Foley
Silvervision.
too, by the way. Glorified stunt.
Oh God, yeah.
I'm just saying. Go ahead.
Yeah. Ended up working together.
Ended up being friendly. I just talked about it with the the stuff after years.
Ric Flair was such a butthole to Mick Foley, to his face, and on interviews so many times, yet Mick is still nice to him. I don't even know why. But, Ric Flair gave an interview with a company called Silvervision. They did the distribution for all the DVDs and VHSs in the UK and Europe for all WWE, home media kind of stuff. And the interviewer uses the word like heel or something like that in the interview. And Ric Flair stops him and says, you don't have the right to use the word heel. The only person who is not in the business who has the right to use inside terminology is Dave Meltzer. And I can't remember if I begrudgingly agree with him or I was like, dude, it's the 2000s. At this point, everyone's got the internet.
I mean, what would you rather have? This is my famous thing that I do, like my pet peeve. Would you rather have somebody using wrestling terminology? And if you turn around and say, we do it sometimes for people to just tune in. Hey, by the way, a heel is a bad guy. It's just our wrestling terminology to kind of address that. That's our term or vocabulary that we speak. Would you rather have that and say, so Ric Flair, you're body slamming your way into town. How about you suplex me with one of your figure fives? Like figure four, is that like half a figure eight in speed skating or what? You see what I mean? You can make a lie, you can goof on somebody, but when you're trying to say, not, hey, I know the business, brother, you're basically just using terminology that the wrestler would be comfortable with. I'm just guessing, right? It's not like you said, hey, it's like a heel, not the back of my foot. Wink, wink. Let's suplex our way into the next segment.
Yes, it's pretty much that, I think. But I don't know. It's one of those things
Flair,
where I do it, and it I annoy myself.
Here's the thing, and we've all been there as wrestlers. I've had my dark times where you're frustrated, you're angry, you're annoyed, and it just consumes you so much. Ric Flair, sometimes it looks like he just needs an excuse to have an anger outlet at something, or he just wants to get angry and let it out. Whether it's a pizza place, an interview, or I got to go to that pizza place, by the way, in Gainesville. I plan to do it. There's different things that just make people angry, but in the end, it just stretches you out. And Rick has enough medical problems. Hopefully, in this day and age, he's not going to get angry. Of course, I haven't bumped into him. Maybe he'll get angry at me. But it just feels like he gets very angry and resentful towards other people. Bruno's one of the greatest to ever do it. And guess what? Flair's one of the greatest to ever do it. Why can't we just have both being equally as great for the fans of their generation?
I'll tell you why, because I'm going to give you the quote now, and then I'm going to ask you about Bruno.
If I could say one more thing, just like the Ricky Steamboat thing during the best and worst agents, I love watching Ric Flair matches during cardio. Flair versus Steamboat, Flair versus Luger. What else was another one? Hey, Flair versus Shawn at WrestleMania. Flair versus Taker at WrestleMania, 17? And Shawn was 24?
18.
18, I'm sorry. 18 was Toronto, 24 was Orlando. I love watching Ric Flair matches, especially the ones where him and Steamboat there's no rest holds. They're going. So I can separate the person from the talent, and I wish that Bruno and Flair, in a way, could both do that as well.
So here's what Ric Flair, or really his ghostwriter, wrote, because every word did not have a capital letter in his book, so I must presume
did it end the book with woo?
I never got to the end of it, unsurprisingly. Anyway, he had nothing kind to say about Bruno Sammartino. Bear with me, everybody. There's a few paragraphs. Bruno definitely generated intensity, and the fans in the Northeast went crazy for him. I have to admit, though, that I was far from overwhelmed. He was a tremendous draw, a great spokesman for the guys, but not a good in-ring performer. Sammartino could put an opponent in a bear hug or lift him over his back, but he was limited, especially compared to NWA champions like Harley Race, Dory Funk, Jack Briscoe, etc. He also makes allusions that he was always number one in the PWI years because they were based in New York as well. Next paragraph. I recognise that Bruno was loved in New York, Boston, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and other WWF cities, where the people were very conscious of their immigrants' roots and enjoyed seeing an ethnic champion. But my opinion is Pedro Morales was better. They worked different territories, but when Sammartino went to St. Louis, where the NWA was headquartered, nobody cared because he was so far below the standards of wrestlers they knew as champions. With all the fond memories his fans have, Bruno should still be regarded as a hero, even though he's become a bitter man who has spent so much of his retirement burying the business that gave him the money and fame. It's just ludicrous. I've told my second wife, Beth, more about her later, that if she outlives me, I never want her criticising professional wrestling. It's because of the professional wrestling, blah, 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 she's talking about. Bruno should be able to enjoy the things, but, he's bitter, etc. But to characterise Bruno as great, a term that's thrown around much too liberally, he found an affront to that, calling Bruno as great. And then Bruno, in an interview later, would call Ric Flair a liar and stated, I do not respect Ric Flair, I don't respect him at all, and called him a poor ambassador for the wrestling business. Taking into all that, Bruno was limited. Who cares?
Every professional wrestler is limited. Ric Flair's limited. I'm limited. Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Triple H, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Basically, what Bruno did was bring the authentic Bruno Sammartino. And of course, I said it before, Italian-American champion, Italian-American demographic, Madison Square Garden, he sells out every time. What's wrong with that? I've watched Bruno and Pedro Morales both work in matches on YouTube. They're equally as limited and equally as over in their ethnicity. Obviously, Pedro was the champion for his demographic, so was Bruno. That's how they booked. So you think WWE buying AAA wrestling isn't going to feature Rey Mysterio and all the other, Mexican and Latin American wrestlers and luchadors? That's what draws the demographics for that region. I watched the Bruno interview where he told Ric Flair and talked a little bit about him being just not a great ambassador because of his habits, his personal life. Obviously, he's been famous for having the robe in hotel bars and having nothing on underneath and dressing on or dancing on the bars. I think Bruno even alluded to some of that stuff in that interview. So both are great talents. Both drew immense amounts of money. But from a personal level, I'd much rather be around a person like Bruno Sammartino than Ric Flair every day of the week.
Now, you said you met Bruno Sammartino. Thing is, he's not hometown, I know, because you're Philadelphia, he's Pittsburgh, or he's Italy, really, Abruzzo, Italy. But, he made Pittsburgh his home, and he's a hometown hero to everybody there. But he's your state town hero, if that makes sense. Home state hero, I guess, is what I'm saying. Were you ever like a huge Bruno fan back in the day? Or were you more NWA and etc.?
No, I obviously, after I got into the business, I had to look back at the Gorgeous George era or any kind of, and YouTube wasn't around either. So a lot of the Bruno stuff was VHS tapes. That's how old I am. And then growing a greater appreciation, obviously doing this show, I will look up classic wrestling just to see the Antonio Rocas, who else, Freddie Blassie, Bobo Brazil, Ernie Ladd, all these different talents, and even the older Japanese wrestlers, just to see what Japanese wrestling was like way back when. And then now you're getting me more to look at World of Sport, which meeting Robbie Brookside was one of the highlights of my life, not just my career. Such a nice dude when I went down to the Performance Center, but he told me some stories, and I got to see Dave Taylor and Steve Regal before he was William Regal, all these different treasures within the business over the generations, eras, and decades. But I was never a Bruno Sammartino fan until I became more of a worker to be aware of how over he is. But one thing's for sure, on the independents, and this is after my WWE run that I bump into him, so I was kind of more in tune. He was a gentleman. He was a normal guy. You ask a question, you get an honest answer. Can I get a picture with you? Very gracious. Very much that way. And it wasn't in Philadelphia, but it was somewhere in between, I think, he was booked for the show. So he was not showing up visiting friends. He was booked for an autograph session. So I was going to take advantage of getting to know him a little bit. And Tom Brandy knew him a whole lot better and spoke to him and always sung his praises. So a fan of him as a worker, but more of a fan of him as a human being. And loved when he said, I just wake up in the morning and I sit at my dining room table or my kitchen table. I read the paper, I have my coffee and I have some eggs. and I go get a workout in. And it reminded me of Bob Armstrong, which, by the way, Bob Armstrong also great worker, but an even better dude, a better guy, all the Armstrongs. Bob, this was like, I get goosebumps from this. Bob would tell me, this is how old school he was with working out. When he went to the gym, he would pack a lunch in a metal lunch pail. He would spend that much time in the gym working out and obviously talking to people and enjoying the environment. But he was like, I pack a lunch. I'm like, that's incredible that you're that much. I was like, I never thought I'd meet somebody who loves working out more than me. But Bob Armstrong, another guy that's gone, and it's sad.
Yeah, some of the hugest arms ever on a wrestler, Bob Armstrong. For people who don't know, he's the father of Road Dogg, as well as, Brian, Scott, and Steve as well, of the Armstrong wrestling family. Just going back to Bruno one more time before we go on to the news, is even though you weren't like a big fan of him at the time, and he's not like a super tall dude as far as I can tell, maybe like 5'10", very wide, obviously, very stocky. Is he someone that even if you didn't really know who he was or, grew up as a fan and everything, has he just got that aura?
Yeah, and actually he's very unassuming and you would say maybe introverted in a public setting and very quiet and not making everybody know that Bruno Sammartino's here. But the presence, the poise, and I think you may not guess he's a wrestler unless you look at him. You're like, well, obviously that's Bruno Sammartino, who doesn't know him? But if you didn't know him, you'd be like, is that like one of the legends of strongman competition? Is that a legendary powerlifting champion? Like you would know by looking at him, this guy did something outside 9 to 5. I need to know what it is. And you gravitate towards that.
Yeah. Right, let's go on to the news then. So as you tee up this video, have you seen this yet?
I watched it once because I couldn't bear to watch it one more than once. So, all right, we're gonna go with the fan cam, or are we gonna go with?
Let's go with the official video first. But as you're teeing that up, right? So this is a triple threat match, also featuring Kairi Sane and Rhea Ripley. Zoey Stark, the knee injury. So there seemed to be a mistimed spot where Kairi was to turn around and walk into the center of the ring so Zoey Stark could hit a springboard dropkick off the ropes from the opposite side. But there may have been some mistiming involved. And now the WWE official footage, which we're going to watch first, there's a sort of late cut, so you don't get that, the whole story. And I can't go on Netflix and record it on screen because they've already edited it out. So we're doing our best, and we've got some fan cam footage as well to give us the full picture. But Stevie, over to you. What went wrong?
All right, thank you, James. And first and foremost, it's very heartbreaking to know that she has a second injury. We're going to talk about the NXT injury as well, but this looks really, really bad. And she's hit this springboard dropkick like almost to perfection. We watched it to the point where Dakota Kai, I think, got her bell rung that one time doing it, but her, from a technical standpoint, has been able to hit this dropkick across the ring in a 20-foot ring. That's very impressive. So we're going to play it straight through, and I'm going to look at it again. Oh, right there. That's it right there. And we don't have a replay, obviously, so let's go again. I'm going to go. I already know kind of what went wrong here, and you can guess too by look at that. Like this leg is not up. So she's already planning. She has a way where she can literally break her ankle with this too. So we're going to see how she lands. Oh my God. You see that? So I don't know. She's hit this move so many times, James. I couldn't tell you why. I'm going to go slow-mo and back and forth. It's like her legs didn't go to drop kick. Like they're both coming in a downward motion here. And then that's beyond rough, dude. Her foot's caught on the mat, her knee's going this way, and her body is going that way. And then, of course, it's so many different directions. Is there an official diagnosis of what did she tear her ACL or she tear everything? Looks like she broke her leg too.
As of yet.
What's that?
Do you know, when I look at it, it looks like she's pulled her leg out of a hip socket.
Oh. But my thing is,
so there's more. I'm sorry. There's more of a story behind this. So apparently, this might have been a matter of a bit of mistiming. So apparently, as Zoey Stark was climbing up the rope to jump, she was yelling "Kyrie." So there may have been a mistiming where, obviously, if you see how far away Kyrie is there, she's a step or two away from maybe where she should have been to do the dropkick. But that sort of, I'm wondering if that is what has made Zoey Stark second guess what she's doing and try to pivot mid-air, and this is the result. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, now that you put it that, because I was going to assume that Carrie is trying to run towards her too late. She's got to be in the position to bump backwards while giving her. We talked about it with clotheslines, the drop kick with Eugene. Carrie's got to be running through the drop kick so Zoey can turn her body, and then Carrie has enough room to bump in the ring. Now, Zoey, I don't know what she was trying to land on her feet. And dude, that's about as rough as you can get right there. She tried to land on her feet to do the spot again or to reset the spot, but she ended up, God, with an injury that's just brutal. Absolutely brutal. Was there any breaks in the leg or was just torn ligaments? Which is still bad.
We don't know. There has been no update as I'm checking this. So I'm checking this at my time, 3:37 p.m. on a Tuesday. So if there are any other Wednesday. So if there are any other updates, we'll put it on screen for you as well. But I mean, that's terrible. That's really horrific. It's
heartbreaking, and it's her second one. And now how long is it going to take her it's going to be a year minimum. And then what's WWE going to do with her? Now, I would say that she's been doing the right to censor type thing of trying to censor everybody and everything. If they really wanted to, now you don't have to work. You can just do promos, do this, and put a new light on the women's division. But if they do nothing with her, that's a bad indication that when your time's up, we might do some stuff with you, but you're essentially done. If they see value in the character that she was trying to do, they can run with that now. And I would love to see it. People are like, how do you feel about it? Get it over, make some money, do whatever you're going to do with it. Don't get injured again. But she's grabbing the knee. If she had broken her ankle, this is the only semi-bright spot, I guess. If she broke her ankle, her tibia, anything below the knee, she'd be grabbing that first, for a leg break. And it looks like everything from the little bit that I'm seeing, it's still in line. Like the Dante Martin, when he broke his ankle, his foot was turned all the way around, even no matter which way he grabbed. She could have torn every ligament in her knee, or just the ACL, which is bad enough. And we even have footage of her being carried to the back.
Yeah, it's not that she can't put weight on it, it's that she can't even move it with support. That's how bad it was.
And this isn't for effect. That's not for her gimmick or anything. That's literally, you got to pick. If it was a strong enough dude, I'd be like, you got to pick me up. I don't even want to put pressure on it. You know why? What if I'm going to tear another ligament just trying to walk it off or doing whatever? This was a smart idea to have that guy pick her up. So the clip we showed, the official WWE camera footage, which now, like James said, has been edited out, we couldn't really see. We saw the end result, the worst part of the whole thing. But now we go into the what went wrong that I could assume. And I think you're right. I think she was just too far away and didn't run into the drop kick in midair, which caused Zoey to pull up and try to land on her feet, and obviously didn't. So let's take a look at the fan cam footage. Yeah. I mean, Carrie's not even looking. I think Zoey went too soon. When you saw with Dakota Kai, she drop kicked her feet right through Dakota Kai. And that's really the only way to do that, as long as you don't kick her in the face. But here we go. She's assuming that Carrie's going to turn around and have enough time to run, but Not really. Yeah, see, she knows midair. Once she goes here, Carrie's still against the rope. There's no way she's going to make that. That's where she went wrong. In other words, people would have laughed. People would have called it a botch. People would have did whatever. But she should have just flattened out and pancaked herself in the dropkick and completely missed it, sold her stomach, maybe got rolled up, and go back to it later on.
She looks like she's doing the Liu Kang kick.
Yeah.
Midway there. Oh, dearie me. Do you know what? I mean, I hate to say this because we are never, ever going to watch it on this show. The Sid leg break. Where he sort of like leans out with one leg and then the other just gets complete. I mean, in that one, it snapped in half.
It snapped in half, and you would assume by the position this snapped in half, but it didn't. It looks like just torn ligaments. I want to say this.
Which could be worse.
It's going to be worse.
Ultimately,
It's like basically when you have an ankle break. Okay, a broken ankle sucks and everything, but spraining and tearing ligaments in your ankle and your foot. I had a Jones fracture in my foot. They put a pin in it. It took longer to recover from the Jones fracture than it did my neck. Think about that. That's how crazy it is when you're talking about legs, ligaments, little tendons, and all these other things. Even blood flow to the knee. It's going to be very important for her to not get blood clots, not travel, not go in altitude, all that stuff, because Chris Candido post-leg surgery had flown and there was blood clots that formed as far as I was, like, with my research on that. This is where the part of me that we talk about what went wrong and we talk about the more technical aspects of this. Zoey Stark and other talents, I think, are trained in a way, get the spot in, do the thing, make sure it's here, but not to think for themselves sometimes that Carrie is too far away. I got to come back and do some stuff to her to make sure she's in the right position to take the drop kick. Can you see that? We're going through at the spot because we have to go through the spot. We have to do the thing. Let's do the thing no matter what position she's in. That's what it felt like. Instead of saying, like the Sabu match we watched on Patreon, if it wasn't there, we kind of went back to it, but we didn't go through the spot and just let it be a complete nightmare from beginning to end. So I'm not blaming her because it really was. It's more Carrie's fault for just not being in position and them trying to get kind of fancy. I'm looking on the outside. And when I turn around, I get drop kicked. Well, if that's the case, stand closer to the center of the ring, Carrie, then turn around and take the drop kick before you even run. Do you see how you can avoid all that?
Doing it the way they were doing it, that requires exceptional timing. Which, when you're in a loud arena and you can't quite hear what's going on and, the lights are on you, the pressure's on you, that kind of thing. And this was Kairi Sane's first match back from injury as well. So she may well have had a bit of, timing rust or ring rust or whatever you want to call it. So that's the result. Here's the thing. Do a lot of the worst injuries happen due to second guessing or trying to pivot too late or hesitating at the moment of truth?
Yeah, I mean, making a midair adjustment off a springboard top rope drop kick, yeah, that's going to be, you're better off if you see she's not there, do that mule kick drop kick and fall back. Kind of like when you miss a drop kick off the ropes and grab your head. See what I mean? Now, missing the drop kick looks different than hitting it. But even so, I would have told her just turn your body, pancake your stomach and your chest and your knees, sell your stomach, let her roll you up, and then come back to that spot if you really want to later on. But definitely, I would have, this is where my OCD kicks in. Like you said, this is her first match back. So for Kairi Sane's sake, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to overcomplicate the spots. I'm not going to make convoluted things until she gets comfortable being back in the ring. And yeah, you can go to the performance center and run the ropes and rehearse and do your dives on the crash pad. Like you said, 10, 15,000 people, live TV, only one take. No, don't take the chance. Well, our hearts go out to Zoe Stark. WWE, do something with this girl. Recreate the right to censor character. Let her get promos in. Let her get the stuff that really draws money. Let her become a heel that people hate. Let her be bitter and resentful to the pretty girls, the models, the Barbies, all that stuff. Give her something to make money with her and make money off her. And don't fire her. Don't give this girl, don't say she's injury prone and all this stuff, because this is not her fault.
Just for people who don't understand, you've mentioned right to censor, or she's doing the right to censor gimmick. I'm not sure she's doing it on TV, or she may be doing it on TV a bit, but she's doing it more on Twitter at the moment. Just to explain what you mean by that and how she's... And everyone's posting images of you in the replies as well, so it's not going unnoticed.
That's the only reason I know about it, because you told me about it and other people told me this is what she's doing. I haven't personally seen it, but I'm telling you right now, do it. I'm not taking offense to it. I think it'd be great. Be great that I wanted Ivory to be a leader, because a woman doing it, being a Karen, is much more over as a heel than any dude. So don't let this girl go, and don't just let her waste in the wind. Take advantage and turn the negative into a positive.
So let's go to NXT Halloween Havoc 2021. This is the first time that Zoey Stark had a knee injury. I believe it's the same knee. She tore her ACL, MCL, and meniscus in 2021. And you're going to compare this injury to it's a rather grim segment it's turning into, unfortunately. But this is the original injury, and it's the same knee.
Yeah, this isn't your murder hour on WWE Wrestling Challenge on Saturday mornings. You're not getting any joy out of this any more than I am. All right, let's look at this. Moonsault, Phoenix Splash. Yep. Oh, man. Oh. Let's do it in slow motion. Let's zoom in. Didn't look anywhere near as bad as the other one, James. Is this the girl, the girl with the devil horns that debuted? Stephanie, what's her face?
Bakir.
Is that her?
No. This was years before.
Oh. Here we go. She's so athletic, man. I told you before, Zoey Stark looks like she can beat...
So she was.
Well,
I'm not sure she's going to be after this.
That's a weird one. That's kind of like, it looks like she just, the impact and she jammed her knee up. It looked like she could have blew both her knees out. Look her up on her tippy toes right there. So that one there, I think she got scared because she didn't get the distance to here and tried to land on her feet and then splash. So in other words, she thought she was coming up short with that.
Oh, look at that. She bends her ankle up a bit.
Yeah.
She does like a stutter thing and then her ankle falls.
I thought her left leg was blown out. Look at that. You see that?
Yeah.
Did she blow her left one out or the right one in this one?
No, I thought it was the same knee.
Well, the right one is the one
she might have injured the
right one is the newest one, and this looks like the left. This lands almost exactly like, except sideways on the second one. This looks like a Dante Martin injury. Like the ankle just turned.
Play it through. Let's see which leg she grabs.
Okay.
I mean, after the landing.
She doesn't grab anything yet. Just try to stand up.
Is that Indy Hartwell?
It might be. Oh, it is her right. Yeah, just based on this. Watch when she tries to stand up. That caves in. She's putting pressure on the left, but not the right. Do you see that? Do you agree?
Yeah.
But she's grabbing at the left a little bit.
Well, yeah, she's lucky she didn't blow both of them out with that landing, I guess.
Well, she's putting weight on the left. My assumption is it's the right. And she's still going, though. So she tore her ACL with that one, which was kind of innocent enough if you think about it, right? The other one, it's pretty obvious. You should have, broke every bone in your leg and blew your blew your knee out. Crazy.
Now, just before we move off this, Zoey Stark was escorted out. You know, stupid windows open, it's blowing me papers everywhere. Zoey Stark was escorted out, but it was a triple threat match, so they couldn't throw the match out because it was Rhea Ripley and Kairi Sane left there for a shot at the Money in the Bank match in whatever, well, probably the Money in the Bank pay-per-view they've got coming up. So I think people were praising them for being able to essentially get through and turn it into a singles match on the fly. But this is 2025 where you do get praise for this, and I was thinking maybe 30 years ago, back in the ECW days or the older WWF days, whenever it was, you'd just be expected to be able to do that, no problem.
Yeah, it would be definitely something that there's a lot more audibles, a lot more people thinking on the fly. But also, in the negative back then, what would people say to Zoey Stark in that match? Why didn't you finish the match? You had more to do. You're already hurt. You might as well finish the match. And if you think that sounds very apathetic and very mean, that's the way the business was. And the locker room is saying this is the same era that you would get completely crucified if you put your hands up to protect yourself from a chair shot to the head.
We shall move on. This is going to be the final segment, and it's an interview that Will Ospreay actually gave about a week ago, and we just missed it last week, I think, so it didn't get included, but I want to bring it to your attention. So during an interview with the Daily Star in the UK, a daily tabloid, Will Ospreay was asked if there was a respect between AEW and WWE stars, or if it's more of a heated rivalry between them. Here is the response. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you. I think deep down we know WWE is a machine, it's an animal. They're in giant stadiums and they're doing so good. But a lot of people look at us and just say we're doing it wrong because WWE are doing this. No, there's different ways of doing it. I got into WWE when I was a kid, but when I became a teenager, I just thought it was lame. There were certain guys I enjoyed, like Eddie Guerrero, or Edge, or Randy Orton, or Stevie Richards. But after a while,
He never said that. Stop it. Everybody on Patreon has the show notes. That was never uttered and never will be uttered.
I wanted to put it in. Anyway, but after a while, I was just like, this is so pantomiming. I'm bored.
Remember, there's libel. If you write the wrong thing, he could sue you.
So every now and again, so he's saying, I'm bored, it's the same stuff, it's recycled, it's over and over again, and every now and again you get something cool like the CM Punk Pipe Bomb promo. Every now and again you get something like, whoa, that was sick. And WWE are on fire now, but I still, not only just a viewer, but as a wrestler, I just don't enjoy it. I haven't, we can stick with that actually. So you were saying beforehand, well, every wrestler's limited. You are, Bruno, Sammartino was, Ric Flair was, etc. And Will Ospreay is saying, you know, things are being recycled, etc. But weren't we saying a few months ago, or you were saying a few months ago, when we were watching a Ricochet match, hey, there's that thing they did last time.
Yeah, they're recycling the thing. People want to see them do the thing, and that's it. Yeah, I mean, everything in wrestling's recycled, Will. Everything is rehashed from 1980s Memphis, 1970s. It's some stuff from the Attitude Era. It's all there's nothing super original about the format of professional wrestling. Good guy versus bad guy. Title on the line. Personal issue for a good guy and bad guy. There's not many ways to go. The players change. The production changes. The look changes. Maybe some of the little things are tweaked for modern wrestling as opposed to the good old days. But essentially, everything's recycled. If you look at the spots, aren't the spots recycled? You want to talk about recycled? Didn't, who was it? That was an FTR Bald and another guy literally did every spot from the Brett match with Austin or somebody. Remember they recreated the match. Was it Punk and FTR Bald?
Might have been.
They did every spot from the exact match and recycled that match and talked about it. Yeah, we watched that match and we took so you exposed the business and you recycled something that was probably one of the greatest matches ever, but you recycled it.
And was it as good? No. It's not the same, it's just recycling.
But it was everything in pro wrestling is recycled, rehashed. Even the characters, all right, the people they hired from WWE, what do? They take their character and they put a different little twist on it, but it's still the same character recycled. Aleister Black was Malachi Black, the House of Black. Punk was Punk still. You could say that's recycled because it's the same. You're going to cut a same pipe bomb promo you did back in WWE. He's not wrong, but the reasons to not enjoy wrestling, then you should not enjoy anything in wrestling because nothing is original.
So, this is the most quoted paragraph here. Of course, I respect WWE. Will Ospreay continues, and I admire everyone there. And a lot of people think I hate Triple H. I really don't. I've never met the guy before in my life, but for me, there's always this little bit of rivalry where I'll just be like, yeah, you guys are the biggest. Yeah, you guys are drawing bigger houses. Yeah, you guys got the bigger deals. But at the moment the bell rings, I think we're better than all of them. I think, honestly, on our worst day, or my worst day, I'm better than a lot of guys in ring, comparing himself to WWE guys in ring. Promos, you got a bunch of guys. Punk's great. Roman Reigns. I don't know why I mentioned Roman Reigns is one of the best promos, but whatever. There's still things that I need to catch up on, but in ring, I generally don't think there's anyone from that side, WWE, that matches any of our guys, AEW.
Well, what I'll say is that obviously he's being a good soldier, much like that Edge thing where he defended the Spike bat with Moxley. Was that the segment we were talking about? You have to be a company guy. You got to be a team player. You got to stick up for your team. I get that. But then again, you're better in the ring. You can do more moves. You're incredibly athletic. And that's a term that's used way too much to kind of denote somebody as being over. And it's not. There's plenty of athletic people in pro wrestling that never got over because they were very one-dimensional. And guess what they did? They recycled the same spots and same moves and did the same matches. So there. And I'm not accusing Will Ospreay of doing that. But then again, he's just playing a company guy. But guess what? Once again, better in the ring doesn't mean that you're drawing more money. Didn't Punk say, like if all you care about are star ratings, then that's why the building's only a third full, and that's why the other people are drawing money. We're in different businesses. The work rate means a lot, but it doesn't mean that you're going to draw money, and it doesn't mean you're going to sell tickets or get people to care about you. Unfortunately, Ricochet and Will Ospreay, there's no part of that spot outside of standing there in the fighting stance that I can do. But I could tell you this, there's memorable moments that Steven Richards more than Stevie, but there's memorable moments that people remember. There's characters that people remember. That's what makes the business special. Sure, we've recycled stuff in ECW, but we put our own little spin and unique kind of look, presentation, and characters to it. I like Will, and I talked about it before. When he did that, I think he did a video in his car talking about, I need to alter my style because my body's starting to hurt and I really need a long career. I think I'm paraphrasing it. I want to see Will Ospreay become a character. I haven't seen that. And maybe, Will, you in your sleep, you could probably do better than 90% of the people in the business. You can outshine anybody. But my challenge to you is, what's going to make Will Ospreay memorable? What moment did Will Ospreay create outside of the thing? You have time to do so. I'm not saying you'll never do it, but look at that. What did Will Ospreay say or do in a wrestling environment or on a wrestling show or pay-per-view that makes me say, oh my God, Will Ospreay. If Will Ospreay cut a pipe bomb promo about Triple H and WWE, that would be pretty memorable, although everybody does it this day. But I'm saying if there's anything Will can do to make him stand out as a character who could also outperform everybody in the ring, dude, you got something there. So I don't begrudge him for doing it. I'm sure Tony Khan thinks it's great, but I also think it misses the point that of course it's recycled because everything is. Now do something different. That's the challenge.
I think we mentioned two really important characters in this show that we could relate to this, and one of them is Bruno Sammartino. Ric Flair criticized Bruno for being too limited. Guess what? He was one of the most popular he wasn't even a great promo.
Nope.
But he had the aura. He had the presence. He worked on that. And it wasn't just all about the looks. I mean, he wasn't cut up. He was just a stocky guy. There were a lot of stocky guys. I mean, Rick McGraw was stocky. I'm not saying he's the same as Rick McGraw, but you know what I'm getting at. Benoit, he was world champion. He wasn't a great world champion in 2004. Why? Because basically, maybe it was the point that he got the world title because it was his turn. But he didn't last that long, and he was limited. And it's sort of the same with Will Ospreay. He's almost like a Benoit. He's pretty much the best at what he does, which is the high-flying. He's a good brawler as well. He's got a ton of physical gifts, of course. But how many times can you see that and still gravitate to him?
You know what's memorable about the most memorable thing outside of the thing, which I remember it, but I couldn't tell you the moves. Just tell you they ran around, flipped, did whatever, avoided their finishes, no-sold them, took a hurricanrana, but did a handstand out of it. You know, Sabu does it to you. You're not taking a handstand. Watch our Patreon watch along. But you know what the most memorable part of that match was? When the cage match, I should say, with Kyle Fletcher. When they stood on top of the cage and they were doing the stare down from on top of the cage. That's a moment. You know, remember we were watching a match and I was like, he's firing up way too many times to make the fire up special, the fighting spirit. He had it, but he dipped into it way too much and each one was less than. But that moment of them staring at each other, and this is two former best friends. Now they're going to fight. They're going to bleed. They're going to try to kill each other. Now we got something. That should have been the story. He's an amazing worker, an amazing athlete, and from what I hear, he's a decent dude. But you got to look at what really draws, not the money now, Will, which you're getting paid very well and you deserve it. And I give you credit for giving your house to it, you know, buying a house for your dad or paying it off and buying a new kitchen for your mom. We can't ignore that. That makes me want to root for Will Ospreay. But what moments are you going to create, Will, that people 20 years from now are going to want to buy your autograph, buy your picture, take a picture with you, buy the merch, and buy an 8x10 from you at the convention?
On that basis and on that message, we're going to shut down this show for the week. I always have to qualify.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right then. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be having Unforgiven, we think, next Friday, and a new episode is out every single Friday as well. We may, in June, may not have one episode out. It depends, because I'm away for 2 weeks. Stevie's got other stuff doing, so if we can do it, we will. If we can't, we won't. But we've got so much content going out there that, you know, you won't be wanting anything, at least on the YouTube channel. But once again, we're out every single Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK time.
Can I interject with something? Maybe we put up a YouTube community post with some choices. If I have to do the solo episode, which I enjoyed, it was episode 16, I believe. If you want something, it will be a full smartboard episode, or I'll do something along the lines of more of an educational episode. I'd be happy to do that. And if we have the time to do it, but maybe we get a vote on Patreon as well as YouTube to see what people want to see.
Absolutely. And how do people sign up to the Patreon to take us out?
I don't know. I've never signed up for Patreon.
You put your money in, I guess.
Actually, I do plan to sign up for the Y-Files Patreon. I really enjoy their stuff. Patreon.com/Stevie Richards. We get the $1. Thank you, brother. It should be now. Got me, brother. Like the old Undertaker Phantom Tombstone pile driver from this Tuesday in Texas. But also the $8 producer tier. Watch-alongs every Monday. Watch-alongs every Monday. The ISO recording always goes at the end of that. Watch-alongs every Monday morning. Show notes, pre-show, and also behind-the-scenes footage. And we just put up early access on how we created the cinematic opening for episode 42. That is going to come up on YouTube, but we have certain YouTube exclusives. There will be early access for Patreon supporters on the producer tier. We do thank each and every one of you. We're approaching 1,000 supporters on Patreon. It's very humbling. We're very grateful for that. James is checking it right now, but we're also grateful to everybody here at YouTube. Check it out. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Click the bell to get notified. Also, check out Stevie Richards Fitness. That's my other YouTube channel.
998.
998. Oh, we got to do the watch thing where it goes like that. But we appreciate all the support from YouTube, Patreon. Check out James Romero channel. WSI, lots of interviews from the past up on WSI, and a new YouTube channel coming very soon, so stay tuned for that. We'll probably have the recommended channels down towards the bottom of this one. And that is about it. Thank you for watching episode 47. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you for episode 48, but I don't look forward to talking about Unforgiven 2004. So see you next week.